Every night, when the world finally loosens its grip on you, a quieter struggle begins. The lights go off, the phone stops buzzing, the masks you wore all day slowly fall away. And there you are, alone with your thoughts, the ones you kept busy all day so you wouldn't have to face them, the worries that wait patiently for silence, the questions that never ask for permission, and the tiredness that sleep alone never seems to cure. Not because you're broken, but because you were never taught how to rest like a king. You were trained to stay alert, to stay strong, to stay in control, to solve problems instead of releasing them, to carry responsibility like armor, even when the battle is over. But there is another kind of strength, one that doesn't push, doesn't force, doesn't resist. A quieter strength, a strength that knows when to let go, when to soften the grip, when to allow the mind to stand down. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed night was not an escape from life, but a return to what matters. That the mind does its most important work when it is calm, not busy. That peace comes when you stop arguing with reality and start observing it. And that sleep, when guided by wisdom, can reshape your thoughts, your emotions, and the way you meet tomorrow. This is not just rest, this is training. A gentle reprogramming of the mind while the body sleeps. A chance to release the day without judgment, to loosen old patterns, to return to yourself without effort. Tonight, you don't need to fix anything. You don't need to figure anything out. You only need to lie down and allow the mind to become still, to sleep not as someone escaping the day, but as a stoic king, resting in control, ready to wake renewed. As the words settle, something subtle begins to happen. The body feels heavier, but the mind becomes more alert. Not alert in a tense way, alert in the way a calm guard watches the gates at night. This is the moment most people miss, the moment between doing and resting, between holding on and letting go. This quiet space is where real control is revealed, not the loud kind that forces outcomes, but the quiet kind that governs from within. Sleep is often treated like a reward, something we collapse into after the day has taken everything from us. But beneath that habit is a deeper truth. The way you enter sleep says more about your inner strength than the way you face the world when everyone is watching. When the lights are off and no one expects anything from you, there is nothing left to perform. What remains is who is truly in charge. Many people lie down at night, but they do not rest. Their body is still, yet the mind keeps working overtime, replaying conversations, arguing with moments that already passed, worrying about futures that have not arrived. This is not rest. This is the mind refusing to release control because it never learned the difference between awareness and dominance. Inner sovereignty begins when the mind understands that it does not need to solve life at midnight. The Stoics believed that true power shows itself when nothing is demanded of you. Anyone can appear strong when pushing forward. Very few can remain calm when there is nothing to do. Sleep exposes this. The moment you close your eyes, the mind either obeys reason or drags you through noise. If thoughts pull you without permission, then something inside is ruling unchecked. Not because you are weak, but because no one taught you how to govern the inner world. Inner sovereignty does not mean silencing thoughts by force. That only creates resistance. It means choosing not to follow every thought that appears. Just as a king does not chase every rumor in the kingdom, a disciplined mind does not react to every mental sound. Sleep becomes the training ground for this skill. Each night offers a simple choice: obey every thought or observe them without attachment. When you lie down and decide that nothing needs to be fixed right now, you send a powerful message to the nervous system. Safety replaces urgency. The body understands that the watch can end. Over time, this changes how the mind behaves even during the day. A person who can release control at night learns not to panic during challenges. Calm becomes familiar. Stillness becomes trusted. There is also honesty in sleep that cannot be hidden. During the day, distractions protect you from yourself. At night, there are no shields. If you feel restless, it is often because you are carrying emotions that were never processed. Unspoken anger, unresolved fear, quiet sadness. Inner sovereignty means allowing these feelings to exist without fighting them or feeding them. You do not need to analyze them. You only need to stop resisting their presence. The mind relaxes when it feels respected, not controlled. When you allow thoughts to pass like clouds instead of chasing them, they lose their urgency. This is how authority is built inside, not through tension, but through trust. Each night you practice this, the mind learns a new habit: to stand down when rest is chosen. Sleep also reveals your relationship with control. Some people fear sleep because it feels like surrender. Letting go feels dangerous when life has taught you to stay alert. But surrendering to rest is not losing control. It is choosing where control belongs. The Stoics understood that rest is not weakness. It is strategic withdrawal. A ruler who never leaves the battlefield makes poor decisions. The same is true for the mind. When sleep becomes intentional, it stops being passive. You are no longer dragged into rest by exhaustion. You enter it with dignity, with clarity, with a quiet decision that the day is complete. This signals closure to the mind. Loose ends can wait. Tomorrow will handle itself when it arrives. Over time, this practice reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who must always react. You become someone who chooses when to engage and when to rest. That choice is sovereignty, and it begins in the smallest moments, like the way you lie down at night. As the mind learns to release without fear, sleep deepens. Not because you are tired, but because you are settled. And from that place, something important happens. The inner world stops fighting itself. When that struggle ends, rest becomes natural. And from natural rest, a quieter strength is born, one that carries into every waking hour that follows. When the body finally settles and the breath finds its own rhythm, something deeper is exposed. The quiet does not just bring rest, it brings truth. Whatever has been leading the mind all day steps forward when effort disappears. This is where the mask of control either holds or quietly falls apart. There is a difference between being in charge and appearing in charge. During the day, structure hides disorder. Schedules, conversations, tasks, and noise keep the mind occupied and give the feeling of command. But rest removes all of that. No deadlines, no performance, no one watching. In this empty space, the true ruler of the mind reveals itself. Either reason stands calmly at the center, or old habits rush in to fill the silence. Many people believe they are disciplined because they can push through difficulty. They wake early, work long hours, and carry responsibility. But rest tells a different story. If the mind cannot slow down when nothing is required, then effort has been driven by pressure, not mastery. A mind ruled by anxiety does not relax on command. A mind ruled by fear keeps watch even when there is no danger. Sleep exposes this leadership clearly. The Stoics believed that authority over the self is measured by how little the mind needs external control. If silence feels uncomfortable, it often means the mind has become dependent on stimulation. Noise, scrolling, planning, and replaying the day become tools to avoid facing what lives beneath. When rest arrives, there is nowhere left to hide. The mind must either sit with itself or run from itself. That response reveals who is really in charge. True rulership of the mind does not demand constant attention. It creates trust. When reason leads, the mind understands that rest is safe. Thoughts slow naturally. The body follows. But when impulses rule, the mind stays alert even in the dark. It scans for problems. It resists stillness. This is not intelligence at work. It is habit. And habits do not disappear just because the lights go off. Rest shows whether your thoughts serve you or command you. If one thought leads to 10 others, pulling you deeper into worry, then thought has become the ruler. If emotions rise and dictate how the night unfolds, then emotion is leading unchecked. But if you can notice these movements without being carried away, then something else is present. Awareness, choice, quiet authority. This is why rest is such an honest mirror. There is no reward for pretending, no applause for endurance, only presence. The mind either respects the boundary of night or it ignores it. Learning to rest is not about forcing sleep. It is about teaching the mind that it does not need to stay armed when nothing is attacking. The ruler of the mind is revealed by what you allow to continue when effort stops. If worry continues, worry has power. If calm remains, calm has been practiced. Rest does not create these states. It exposes them. This is why people often say, "I'm tired, but I can't sleep." The body is ready, but the mind is under different leadership. When reason governs, rest becomes efficient. Thoughts appear, but they do not linger. Memories pass without dragging emotion behind them. The mind knows that it can return to action later. This trust comes from repetition. Each night, you choose not to engage with unnecessary thought. You reinforce who holds authority. There is also a deeper lesson here. The ruler of the mind is not the loudest voice. It is the one you listen to. If you respond to every urge, every fear, every mental story, you teach the mind that impulse decides. But when you pause, even briefly, and choose stillness, you shift power. Over time, this changes how the mind behaves even under stress. Rest becomes training in self-command, not through tension, but through release. You learn that nothing falls apart when you stop controlling everything. Life continues. The breath continues. The body knows what to do. This realization weakens the grip of false urgency. As this understanding deepens, sleep stops being a collapse and becomes a statement that you trust yourself enough to rest, that you do not need to solve everything tonight, that the mind can stand down because the ruler is present. And once that ruler is established in rest, it does not disappear in daylight. It follows you into decisions, into conflict, into uncertainty. The one who governs the mind at night learns to govern it everywhere else. As control settles into rest, another truth quietly surfaces. Beneath the calm, beneath the slowing breath, there is often a tiredness that feels older than the day itself. Not the kind that sleep fixes easily, but the kind that carries a message. Most people try to silence it. The Stoics leaned in and listened. Fatigue, in the Stoic view, was never just physical. It was information, a signal sent by the body and the mind together, pointing toward imbalance. They did not see exhaustion as a badge of honor or proof of virtue. They saw it as feedback. Something in the way you are living, thinking, or reacting is asking to be corrected. Modern life teaches the opposite. We are praised for pushing past tiredness, for drinking more caffeine, for staying busy, for ignoring limits. But the Stoics believed that ignoring fatigue was a form of moral blindness. Not morality in the sense of good or bad behavior, but morality as alignment with reason and nature. When you are constantly exhausted, something is out of order. There is a difference between healthy tiredness and chronic fatigue. Healthy tiredness comes from meaningful effort. It carries satisfaction. Chronic fatigue comes from resistance, from carrying what does not belong to you, from fighting reality instead of cooperating with it. The Stoics paid close attention to this difference, especially at night when excuses fall away. When fatigue shows up every evening as restlessness, it often means the mind has been overused in the wrong way. Too much rumination, too much emotional labor, too much concern for things outside your control. The body feels this misuse before the mind admits it. That heaviness you feel is not weakness, it is wisdom trying to get your attention. The Stoics believed that virtue includes self-respect, and self-respect includes knowing when effort has turned into excess. A mind that never rests is not disciplined, it is ungoverned. Fatigue then becomes a moral signal asking a simple question: are you spending your energy on what truly matters? At night, this signal becomes louder. The body is still, but the fatigue remains, not because you worked too hard, but because you worried too much, because you replayed conversations that are over, because you carried responsibility that was never yours to carry. This kind of fatigue does not disappear with sleep alone. It asks for a change in how you relate to your thoughts. The Stoics taught that energy follows judgment. When you judge everything as urgent, everything drains you. When you treat every thought as important, the mind never rests. Fatigue exposes these habits. It shows where you are leaking energy through unnecessary concern. And sleep becomes the moment when this truth is hardest to ignore. Instead of fighting fatigue, the Stoics asked what it was pointing to. Are you resisting reality? Are you chasing approval? Are you trying to control outcomes you cannot command? Each of these creates a specific kind of tiredness, one that sleep alone cannot fix. Recognizing this turns fatigue into a guide rather than an enemy. There is also moral clarity in knowing when to stop. Rest for the Stoics was not indulgence, it was maintenance of the instrument. A dull blade cannot cut cleanly. A depleted mind cannot act with wisdom. If fatigue is ignored long enough, judgment suffers. Emotions take over. Small problems feel overwhelming. This is not fate. It is feedback that was dismissed too many times. When you begin to treat fatigue as a signal, your nights change. You stop blaming the body. You stop forcing sleep. Instead, you gently review how the day was lived. Not with guilt, but with honesty. Where was energy wasted? Where was attention given to things that did not deserve it? This quiet reflection often brings more relief than sleep itself. Over time, responding correctly to fatigue builds integrity. You learn to align effort with values. You rest without shame. You work without self-violence. The mind begins to trust you again because you listen when it speaks softly instead of waiting until it screams. As this relationship deepens, sleep becomes cleaner, less heavy, less restless. The mind enters rest knowing it was not abused during the day. And from that place, recovery happens naturally. Fatigue, when understood, becomes a compass. It points away from excess and toward balance, away from noise and toward clarity. The Stoics did not fear it. They respected it, and by doing so, they preserved the strength needed to live well, both in the quiet of the night and in the demands of the day that follows. As fatigue is understood and no longer ignored, a subtle shift takes place. The body begins to soften, but something else sharpens. Awareness. The night no longer feels like a place where things simply happen to you. It starts to feel like a space you can inhabit with intention. This is where self-governance quietly takes root. Most people treat the night as a collapse zone, a place where discipline ends and habits take over. The phone comes out. Thoughts run freely. Emotions roam without supervision. The day had rules, but the night feels lawless. The Stoics saw this very differently. For them, night was not an absence of order. It was a testing ground for it. Self-governance means the ability to direct yourself without external pressure. During the day, structure does much of that work for you. Clocks, obligations, other people's expectations. At night, those disappear. What remains is choice, what you allow into your mind, what you engage with, what you let go of. This is why night reveals character so clearly. The Stoics believed that a person who governs themselves only when watched is not truly governed at all. Real discipline shows itself in private, in silence, in moments where no reward is offered. The night is full of these moments. Each one asks a simple question: who decides now? When the mind is tired, habits try to take over. This is not failure. It is nature. The question is whether those habits have been chosen or merely inherited. Endless scrolling, late-night worrying, replaying old stories. These are not random behaviors. They are signs of a mind that has not been given clear direction once the noise fades. Night becomes a domain of self-governance when you stop letting impulse decide how it unfolds. This does not require strict rules or force. It begins with awareness. Noticing what pulls at your attention, noticing what disturbs your calm, and choosing, gently but firmly, not to follow everything that calls. The Stoics taught that freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want, but the ability to not do what harms you. At night, this wisdom becomes practical. You are free to stay mentally busy, but you are also free to rest. You are free to replay the day, but you are also free to release it. Governance lies in that choice. There is something powerful about choosing restraint when no one sees. It builds inner authority. The mind learns that you are consistent, that you do not abandon reason when tired. Over time, this creates trust between you and yourself. And where there is trust, there is calm. Self-governance at night also means deciding when thinking is no longer useful. Many people mistake constant thought for responsibility. They believe that if they stop thinking, something will be missed. But the Stoics understood that reason includes knowing when reason has done enough. Night is not for solving life. It is for restoring the one who must live it. When you allow the night to be governed by wisdom instead of impulse, the quality of rest changes. Sleep comes more naturally, not because you forced it, but because nothing inside is resisting it. The mind settles when it knows it is being guided, not abandoned. There is also a moral aspect to this. How you treat yourself in private reflects how you value yourself. If you constantly overstimulate, overthink, or neglect rest, You send a message that your well-being is secondary. The Stoics believed that living well includes caring for the mind as carefully as one would care for a tool meant for long use. Night governance is not about control for its own sake. It is about alignment. Aligning your actions with your values even when tired. Aligning your thoughts with what is necessary, not what is loud. Each night becomes a small act of integrity. Over time, this practice reshapes identity. You no longer see yourself as someone at the mercy of mood or habit. You become someone who can choose stillness, someone who can end the day cleanly. This strength does not announce itself. It simply shows up as steadiness. And as the night becomes a place of self-governance, something unexpected happens. The day begins to feel lighter. Decisions feel clearer. Emotional reactions soften, not because life became easier, but because the one living it became more grounded. The Stoics did not separate philosophy from daily life. For them, wisdom was proven in small, repeated actions. Choosing how the night unfolds is one of those actions. Quiet, private, powerful. It is here, in the unseen hours, that true self-rule is practiced. And once practiced consistently, it no longer stays confined to the night. As the night becomes a place you no longer drift through unconsciously, another layer reveals itself. Beneath thoughts, beneath habits, beneath choice itself, there is a deeper system always listening. It remembers how you respond to pressure. It learns what you treat as danger. And it decides, often before you think, whether to tighten or to release. This is the nervous system, and it has been trained by everything you've lived through. Most people believe they are ruled by thoughts, but in truth, they are often ruled by reactions. A racing heart, shallow breath, a tight chest. These responses happen before logic arrives. Reason may know there is no threat, but the body does not always agree. The Stoics understood this conflict well. They knew that wisdom without a trained nervous system struggles to express itself, especially at night. Reason speaks quietly. The nervous system listens to repetition. If stress has been your default for years, the body learns to stay alert even in safety. Night becomes difficult not because the mind is weak, but because the body has been conditioned to expect danger in stillness. Training the nervous system is not about forcing calm. It is about showing it, again and again, that calm is safe. The Stoics believed that reason should lead, but they also understood human nature. They did not expect the body to obey instantly. They practiced patience. They worked with the body instead of against it. At night, this meant allowing the nervous system to downshift gradually, not through command, but through consistency. Every time you lie down and choose slow breathing over shallow breathing, you send a signal. Every time you let a thought pass without reacting, you send another. Over time, the nervous system learns a new pattern. It begins to associate darkness with safety instead of vigilance. Silence with rest instead of threat. This is why rest cannot be rushed. A nervous system trained by years of urgency does not relax just because you want it to. It relaxes when it trusts. Trust is built through repeated proof. Each night you do not panic, do not stimulate, do not engage unnecessary thought. You teach the body something important. Nothing bad happens when you let go. The Stoics practiced this through observation. When a physical sensation appeared, they did not label it as danger. They noticed it without judgment. A fast heartbeat was simply a heartbeat. A tense muscle was simply tension. By removing the story, they weakened the reaction. The nervous system learns not from explanations, but from outcomes. When nothing terrible follows stillness, the alarm quiets. Reason becomes effective only when the body is willing to listen. You may tell yourself that everything is fine, but if the nervous system has learned otherwise, words alone will not convince it. This is why training must happen when the system is most honest. At night, when defenses are low and habits reveal themselves. There is a powerful shift that happens when the body begins to follow reason instead of overriding it. Sleep deepens. Thoughts lose urgency. Emotional waves pass more quickly. You stop feeling like rest is something you fall into and start experiencing it as something you enter willingly. This training also changes how you respond during the day. A nervous system that has learned calm at night is less reactive under pressure. Stressful situations still arise, but the body does not escalate them unnecessarily. You respond instead of react. This is not emotional numbness. It is emotional regulation rooted in trust. The Stoics did not seek to eliminate emotion. They sought to prevent emotion from ruling unchecked. Training the nervous system allows reason to guide emotion instead of being drowned out by it. This balance is what creates steadiness, not suppression, not denial, but harmony. Night after night, this practice compounds. The nervous system becomes familiar with release. The mind stops bracing for impact. Sleep becomes restorative instead of shallow. And something subtle but profound changes. You begin to feel safe inside yourself. When the body trusts that reason is present, it no longer needs to stay on guard. That trust is earned quietly, without force, without struggle, through gentle repetition and consistency. This is how the Stoics built inner strength. Not by overpowering the body, but by educating it. Teaching it when to stand down. Teaching it that rest is not failure, but preparation. And as this training continues, a new rhythm emerges. Thought slows. Breath deepens. The body settles into sleep not as an escape, but as a choice. Reason does not disappear in rest. It remains quietly in charge, allowing the whole system to recover. This is the kind of authority that lasts. One that does not shout. One that does not strain. One that the nervous system recognizes and obeys, because it has learned, through experience, that it can. As the nervous system learns to soften its guard, another layer of tension becomes visible. Not in the body this time, but in the mind itself. Thoughts still arrive, but now you can see how heavily armed they are. Every idea comes loaded with urgency. Every memory carries emotion. Every plan feels like it must be solved now. Before rest can truly take hold, these weapons must be set down. This is where cognitive disarmament begins. Most people go to bed mentally armed. They carry arguments, plans, regrets, and imagined futures into the dark. The mind treats the night like enemy territory, staying alert just in case something needs to be handled. But there is nothing to fight here. Cognitive disarmament is the act of teaching the mind that it does not need to defend, attack, or solve anything before sleep. The Stoics understood that thoughts gain power only when we treat them as commands. A thought itself is neutral. It becomes dangerous when it is believed without question. Before bed, this belief habit is strongest. Fatigue lowers resistance, and the mind grabs onto whatever appears. Disarmament does not mean stopping thoughts. It means removing their authority. This begins with recognizing that nighttime thinking is rarely productive. The mind is tired, emotional, and incomplete in its information. Decisions made here often feel urgent, but look foolish in the morning. The Stoics advise delaying judgment when the mind is not clear. Night is a time for suspension, not conclusion. Cognitive disarmament happens when you stop asking every thought to justify itself. Instead of following a worry, you notice it and let it stand without response. No agreement, no argument, just acknowledgement. This removes its weapon. A thought without reaction cannot escalate. Many people fear that if they stop engaging with thoughts, they are being irresponsible. But responsibility has a time and place. The Stoics believed wisdom includes timing. Night is not the time for strategy. It is the time for restoration. By postponing engagement, you protect the quality of both rest and future action. There is also relief in realizing that not every thought is personal. Some are leftovers from the day, some are habits, some are emotional echoes. Treating them all as important exhausts the mind. Disarmament teaches selectivity. You learn that you can choose which thoughts deserve attention and which can pass unexamined. Language matters here. The way you speak to yourself before bed shapes how the mind behaves. Harsh self-talk keeps the system alert. Gentle, neutral language signals safety. The Stoics practiced inner speech carefully, not to flatter themselves, but to remain truthful and calm. Statements like, "This can wait," or "Nothing is required right now," carry authority without force. Another aspect of cognitive disarmament is releasing the need for mental closure. The mind loves unfinished stories. It wants resolution before rest. But life does not always offer clean endings. Learning to sleep with open loops is a sign of maturity. It shows trust in your future self. Trust that clarity will come when it is time. When you stop forcing closure, the mind relaxes. It no longer feels responsible for holding everything together. This is especially important for those who carry leadership, caregiving, or constant decision-making roles. The mind needs to know that it is allowed to stand down without consequence. Over time, this practice rewires how the mind associates night. Instead of being a place where worries grow louder, it becomes a place where they lose strength. Thoughts still appear, but they feel lighter, less convincing, less urgent. The mind begins to expect rest instead of conflict. Cognitive disarmament also creates emotional space. Feelings are allowed to exist without being analyzed. Sadness can pass without explanation. Anxiety can rise without being fed. This acceptance drains their intensity. Emotions, like thoughts, calm down when they are not challenged or dramatized. This does not happen overnight. The mind resists giving up its weapons because it believes they keep you safe. But each night you choose not to engage, you prove otherwise. Nothing collapses. Problems remain manageable. Life continues. This proof is what changes the habit. As disarmament becomes familiar, sleep deepens naturally. There is less friction between body and mind, less internal noise, less effort required to rest. You begin to feel the difference between lying down and actually letting go. And something subtle follows you into the day. You become less reactive, less pulled into unnecessary mental battles. The mind remembers that it can set things down and pick them up again later. This flexibility is strength. Cognitive disarmament before bed is not about passivity. It is about choosing peace over false urgency, choosing rest over rehearsal, choosing trust over control. The Stoics knew that a mind at peace sleeps better, and a well-rested mind lives better. When you disarm the mind at night, you are not giving anything up. You are reclaiming authority, quietly, consistently. And the rest that follows is no longer fragile. It is grounded, stable, earned. As the mind learns to set its weapons down, another habit quietly loosens its grip, the habit of being impressed by events, by opinions, by praise and criticism, by everything that demanded a reaction during the day. When night arrives, there is an opportunity most people never take, the chance to end the day without bowing to it. Ending the day unimpressed does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means refusing to let external noise define your inner state once the day is done. Throughout the day, the mind is constantly pulled outward. Messages arrive, expectations press in. Success feels exciting, failure feels heavy. Each experience leaves a mark. If these marks are carried into the night, the mind never truly rests. The Stoics believe that most suffering comes not from events themselves, but from the value we assign to them. Being impressed is a form of attachment. When something impresses you, it claims space in your mind. It demands replay. It asks for judgment. Ending the day unimpressed is the act of returning that power to yourself. At night, the world has already moved on. Conversations are over. Outcomes are sealed. Yet many people continue reacting as if something can still be changed. The Stoics saw this as wasted energy. Reason asks a simple question before rest. Does this still require me? If the answer is no, then carrying it further only disturbs peace. There is strength in neutrality. When you review the day without exaggeration, everything finds its proper size. Wins become pleasant, not defining. Mistakes become information, not identity. Other people's behavior loses its sting. You begin to see that much of what felt important was only loud, not meaningful. Ending the day unimpressed also protects self-worth. Praise can be as disruptive as criticism if it is taken too seriously. When you go to bed replaying compliments, the mind stays alert, hungry for more. When you replay insults, the mind stays defensive. Both steal rest. The Stoics trained themselves to accept events without letting them inflate or diminish the self. This practice brings a quiet dignity. You do not deny what happened. You simply refuse to let it rule you after its time has passed. The day had its moment. The night belongs to restoration. There is also emotional relief in recognizing how little truly requires judgment. Many things that stir the mind are outside your control. Other people's moods, random setbacks, unexpected changes. Being unimpressed is not apathy, it is clarity. It is the recognition that reacting endlessly does not equal responsibility. When you end the day unimpressed, the nervous system feels it. The body receives the message that the threat is gone. No more scanning, no more preparing responses. Muscles soften, breath deepens. The mind stops rehearsing. This does not happen by accident. It is a deliberate inner gesture, a quiet closing of the book on the day. The Stoics practiced this through reflection, not rumination. They would briefly review actions, note what aligned with reason and what did not, and then release it. No punishment, no praise, just honesty followed by closure. Closure is what the mind craves before sleep. Not answers, but permission to stop. Ending the day unimpressed gives that permission. It tells the mind nothing else is required tonight. Over time, this habit changes how you experience life. Events lose their power to linger. Emotional spikes settle faster. You become harder to disturb, not because you are numb, but because you are grounded. The world can move, and you remain steady. This also restores a sense of proportion. You begin to see how often energy was spent on things that did not deserve it, arguments that went nowhere, worries that resolved themselves, moments that felt huge but faded quickly. This awareness builds wisdom. You learn what is worth your attention and what is not. Ending the day unimpressed creates space for gratitude without attachment. You can appreciate what went well without clinging to it. You can acknowledge difficulty without carrying it forward. This balance is rare, and it is powerful. As night deepens, the mind that has released the day becomes lighter. Thoughts slow because they are no longer fueled by emotional charge. Sleep arrives without struggle, not because you forced it, but because there is nothing left to hold on to. And when morning comes, you wake without yesterday weighing on you. The slate feels cleaner, decisions feel clearer. You are not reacting to the past, you are meeting the present. The Stoics understood that mastery is not shown in dramatic moments, but in quiet endings. Ending the day unimpressed is one of those endings. Subtle, private, transformative. When you practice this consistently, the mind learns a new rhythm. Engage fully when it matters. Release fully when it does not. This rhythm protects peace. And from that peace, a deeper strength begins to grow, one that carries you through the day without exhausting you by night. As the day is released without applause or punishment, something quieter remains. Not thoughts this time, but feelings, subtle, heavy, often unnamed. They sit beneath the surface long after events are over. This is emotional residue, and if it is not dissolved at night, it hardens quietly, shaping how you wake, how you react, how you live. Emotional residue is not drama. It is the leftover charge from moments that were never fully processed. A tense conversation that ended too quickly. A disappointment brushed aside. A small victory that brought relief but no closure. These emotions do not demand attention during the day because distractions keep them contained. At night, when stillness arrives, they rise. Most people try to escape this rise. They distract themselves, they scroll, they numb, they think their way around feeling. But the Stoics understood something important. Emotions that are avoided do not disappear. They wait. And night is when they collect interest. Dissolving emotional residue does not require reliving the day or analyzing every feeling. In fact, analysis often strengthens emotion. The Stoic approach was simpler and more effective. They allowed emotion to exist without narrative. No story, no judgment, just presence. Emotion loses power when it is felt without resistance. Resistance tightens it. Suppression stores it. But gentle allowance lets it move through. This is why the body often releases emotion through sighs, tears, or deep breaths when finally at rest. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of completion. At night, the mind is quieter, but the body remembers. Tight shoulders may carry frustration. A heavy chest may carry sadness. A restless stomach may carry fear. Dissolving emotional residue begins by noticing these sensations without labeling them as problems. When the body feels seen, it softens. The Stoics did not try to eliminate emotion. They understood it as part of human nature. What they refused to do was let emotion dictate behavior or identity. At night, this meant allowing feelings to rise without giving them authority. You feel them, but you do not become them. There is relief in realizing that emotions do not require action to pass. Many people believe that if they feel something, they must do something, fix it, express it, decide something. But emotions often resolve on their own, when they are not interrupted. Night provides the perfect space for this natural resolution. Dissolving emotional residue also prevents emotional carryover. When feelings are not released, they spill into the next day. You wake irritated without knowing why, heavy without cause, reactive before anything has happened. This is not the fault of the new day. It is unfinished business from the last one. The Stoics practiced emotional honesty without indulgence. They acknowledged what was felt, asked whether it was within their control, and released what was not. This mental posture creates emotional closure, not by force, but by clarity. There is also a physical component to this process. Slow breathing, relaxed posture, and stillness tell the body that it is safe to let go. Emotional residue often dissolves when the body exits defense mode. This is why nights filled with tension rarely heal emotion, even if sleep occurs. Allowing emotional residue to dissolve teaches the mind an important lesson, that it does not need to protect you by holding on to everything, that feelings can pass without harm, that vulnerability does not equal danger. Over time, this reduces emotional reactivity across all areas of life. This practice also deepens self-trust. When you consistently allow emotions to complete their cycle, the mind learns that it can rely on you. You do not abandon inner experience. You do not dramatize it either. You stay present. This steadiness builds inner safety. Dissolving emotional residue is especially important for those who carry responsibility. Leaders, caregivers, thinkers. People who must remain composed during the day. Their emotions are often postponed, not processed. Night becomes the only chance for release. Treating it with respect prevents emotional buildup that eventually leads to burnout. As residue dissolves, sleep quality changes. Dreams become less intense. The body rests more deeply. The mind stops bracing. You wake feeling lighter, even if circumstances have not changed. This lightness is not ignorance, it is integration. Over time, this nightly release changes how emotions show up during the day. They move faster, they feel less overwhelming. You respond with more balance, not because you suppress feeling, but because you no longer store it. The Stoics believed that peace is not the absence of emotion, but the absence of inner conflict. Dissolving emotional residue removes that conflict. You stop fighting what was already felt. You stop carrying what no longer serves you. Night after night, this practice cleans the inner space, like dust settling after movement stops. Nothing dramatic, just quiet clarity. And from that clarity, rest becomes deeper. The mind no longer guards against emotion. The body no longer braces. Sleep arrives not as escape, but as renewal. This is how the night heals what the day could not. Not through force, not through thinking, but through allowing what is already there to finally complete its journey and leave you lighter by morning. As emotional weight loosens and the inner space feels clearer, something else quietly steps forward. A voice, familiar, persistent. It tells stories about who you are, what today meant, and what tomorrow says about you. This voice does not sleep easily because it believes it must keep you defined. Before true rest can happen, this story must be gently set aside. Narrative identity is the story you carry about yourself, the role you play, the labels you repeat, the explanation you give for why things happen to you. During the day, this story helps you move through the world. At night, it often becomes a burden. The mind keeps narrating even when there is nothing left to say. Most people fall asleep still wearing their identity like armor. The successful one, the struggling one, the responsible one, the one who always messes things up. These narratives feel personal, but they are learned, repeated, reinforced, and at night they replay without interruption. Removing narrative identity before sleep does not mean denying your life or pretending nothing matters. It means remembering that you are not required to carry your entire story into rest. The Stoics understood that identity is useful for action, not for peace. When action ends, identity can rest too. The problem with narrative identity at night is that it turns experience into judgment. A simple event becomes proof of who you are. A mistake becomes a definition. A compliment becomes a standard to maintain. This keeps the mind active, comparing, defending, explaining. Sleep struggles to arrive when the self is busy protecting its image. The Stoics practiced stepping back from the story. They observed their thoughts as events, not truths. At night, this meant allowing the mind to exist without explanation. You do not need to be anyone while you sleep. You do not need to make sense of your life in the dark. There is relief in realizing that the story pauses when attention is removed. When you stop asking, "What does this say about me?" the mind quiets. Experience becomes lighter when it is no longer attached to identity. Feelings can exist without defining you. Thoughts can appear without meaning anything. Narrative identity is also tied to time. It pulls the mind backward and forward. Regret and anticipation both live here. Removing the story brings you back to the present moment, where nothing needs interpretation. The present does not require a character. It only requires awareness. At night, awareness without identity feels unfamiliar at first. The mind may resist. It may try to restart the story. This is not failure. It is habit. Each time you notice the story and gently step away, you weaken its grip. You are not fighting it. You are no longer feeding it. This practice creates a deep kind of rest. The mind is no longer performing, no longer managing how it sees itself, no longer rehearsing tomorrow's role. There is nothing to prove in sleep, nothing to maintain, nothing to fix. Removing narrative identity also softens emotional reactions. When feelings are no longer tied to who you think you are, they pass more easily. Sadness becomes a sensation, not a verdict. Joy becomes an experience, not a measure of worth. This freedom allows the nervous system to relax fully. The Stoics believed that suffering increases when we confuse events with identity. At night, this confusion becomes loud because there are fewer distractions. By setting the story aside, you protect yourself from unnecessary suffering. You allow the mind to return to a simpler state. There is also humility in this practice. You recognize that your story is not the center of the universe. Life continues without your narration. This realization is calming, not diminishing. It lifts pressure. You do not have to hold everything together while you rest. Over time, this changes how you relate to yourself during the day. You become less attached to labels, less reactive to threats against your image, more flexible, more present. Identity becomes something you use, not something that uses you. Before sleep, this flexibility is essential. The mind that clings to identity stays alert. The mind that releases it settles naturally. Sleep arrives not because you forced quiet, but because there is no longer a character demanding attention. Removing narrative identity does not erase your life. It gives it space. It allows tomorrow to begin without yesterday's weight. You wake up closer to what you are beneath the story. The Stoics knew that peace comes when the self loosens its grip on definitions. Night is the perfect place to practice this, quietly, gently, without effort. As the story fades, what remains is simple awareness. Breath, stillness, presence. From this place, sleep is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you allow. And when you wake, the story can return, lighter, wiser, less rigid, no longer ruling you, simply serving you. As the story loosens its grip and the mind no longer feels the need to explain itself, the darkness begins to feel different, not empty, not threatening, but neutral. This is where rational detachment quietly becomes possible. Not as an idea, but as a lived experience. Rational detachment is often misunderstood. Many think it means suppressing feeling or becoming distant from life. The Stoics meant something else entirely. They meant staying connected to reality without being consumed by it. At night, when the world withdraws, this skill can finally be practiced without interference. During the day, detachment is difficult because everything demands response. People speak, tasks pile up, emotions are triggered. At night, none of that is happening. The darkness removes external pressure. What remains is internal movement. Thoughts arise, feelings shift, sensations appear. Rational detachment is learning to let all of this happen without stepping into it. The darkness helps because it offers no stimulation, no faces, no screens, no reactions. This lack of input makes it easier to see the difference between observation and involvement. You notice a thought without chasing it. You feel an emotion without becoming it. You sense the body without tightening around it. The Stoics trained this ability by separating what is happening from what it means. A thought about tomorrow is just a thought. A memory is just a memory. An emotion is just a movement in the body. Meaning is something we add. At night, you can stop adding. Rational detachment does not ask you to push thoughts away. That would still be involvement. It asks you to let them exist without agreement or resistance, like watching shadows move across a wall. You see them clearly, but you do not follow them. This practice is especially powerful in darkness because the mind has fewer distractions to cling to. When a worry appears, you may notice how quickly the mind wants to attach a story to it. Rational detachment interrupts this process. You allow the worry to be present without answering it. There is a quiet strength in not responding, not because you are avoiding something, but because you recognize that response is not required right now. The Stoics believe that reason includes knowing when to act and when to refrain. Night belongs to refraining. As you practice detachment, the mind begins to slow. Not because you commanded it to, but because it is no longer being fed. Thoughts lose energy when they are not reacted to. Emotions soften when they are not judged. Darkness also removes comparison. There is no one to measure yourself against, no success to defend, no failure to correct. This makes it easier to detach from the constant evaluation that drains the mind. You are no longer assessing life. You are simply existing within it. Rational detachment teaches the mind that it can witness experience without being threatened by it. This lesson is absorbed deeply at night when the nervous system is most receptive. Over time, this reduces fear of thoughts and emotions. You stop seeing them as enemies that must be managed. This changes your relationship with sleep. Instead of waiting for the mind to go quiet before resting, you rest while the mind is active, knowing you do not have to engage. Sleep arrives naturally once engagement stops. There is also freedom in realizing that not everything deserves analysis. Many thoughts are automatic, old, repetitive. They do not need answers. Rational detachment allows you to conserve mental energy by refusing unnecessary mental work. The Stoics believed that peace comes from aligning with reality, not from controlling it. Darkness is reality stripped down to its simplest form: breath, body, awareness. Detachment here is not effortful. It is a return to simplicity. As this becomes familiar, you may notice a subtle shift. You feel less pulled by inner noise, less tempted to chase mental activity. There is space between you and your thoughts. In that space, calm grows. This calm is not fragile. It is not dependent on perfect silence or perfect conditions. It is built on understanding. The understanding that you are not required to respond to everything that arises within you. Practicing rational detachment in darkness also strengthens daytime clarity. When challenges appear, you recognize the same pattern. A thought arises, an emotion follows, and you have a choice. Engage or observe. This choice is easier because it was practiced in the quiet. The night becomes a teacher, not through words, but through experience. Each time you allow thoughts to pass without involvement, you reinforce inner freedom. Each time you detach rationally, you reclaim energy. Eventually, the darkness no longer feels like something to endure. It feels like a space where the mind can finally stand down, where reason does not argue, but simply observes. From this place, sleep becomes deep and restorative. Not because everything was resolved, but because nothing needed to be. The mind learned that it can exist without constant participation. This is rational detachment at its core. Presence without possession. Awareness without struggle. And in the quiet of the night, it becomes not just a concept, but a lived reality that reshapes how you rest and how you live. As detachment settles into the darkness, something else becomes possible. The mind no longer needs to debate, no longer needs to bargain with rest, no longer needs conditions to be met before letting go. This is the moment where sleep stops being a discussion and becomes a decision. Most people try to fall asleep through negotiation. Just one more thought, one more check, one more mental solution. The mind says, after this, we can rest. But that moment never arrives, because negotiation itself keeps the system awake. As long as sleep feels conditional, the mind stays alert, waiting for permission that never comes. The Stoics understood that rest, like virtue, does not respond to pleading. It responds to authority. Falling asleep without negotiation means removing the idea that sleep must be earned, solved, or triggered by perfect conditions. It means recognizing that rest is not something you convince yourself into. It is something you allow by stepping out of the way. Negotiation is subtle. It sounds reasonable. I just need to think this through. I'll relax once I understand how tomorrow will go. I'll sleep when this feeling passes. These thoughts feel responsible, but they are rooted in control. The mind believes that staying engaged protects you. The Stoics saw this as a misunderstanding of safety. Sleep requires surrender, not surrender to weakness, but surrender to reality. The day is over. Nothing else can be changed tonight. Negotiating with that truth creates tension. Accepting it creates rest. Falling asleep without negotiation begins with finality, a quiet inner statement that says, nothing else is required, not in an emotional way, in a factual way. This closes the loop the mind keeps trying to reopen. When there is no open loop, the mind has nothing to chase. This does not mean thoughts will stop appearing. They often increase at first, like a child testing boundaries. But when you do not negotiate with them, they lose momentum. Each thought that receives no response weakens the habit of engagement. The Stoics believed that reason should be brief and decisive. Long internal debates drain energy. At night, reason speaks once and steps back. Now we rest. No explanation, no argument. Repetition builds authority. Negotiation also shows up physically. Adjusting position repeatedly. Checking the time. Waiting for the perfect feeling of relaxation. These actions keep the body alert. Falling asleep without negotiation means letting the body settle imperfectly. Comfort is allowed, but perfection is not required. There is freedom in this. You stop chasing sleep and start giving it space. The nervous system senses this shift. It no longer feels pressured to perform. Pressure delays rest. Permission invites it. Many people fear that if they stop negotiating, sleep will not come. But the opposite is true. Negotiation is the obstacle. When you remove it, sleep often arrives quietly, without announcement. The Stoics trusted natural processes. They knew that the body knows how to sleep when it is not interfered with. Trust is essential here. Trust that rest will come without micromanagement. Trust that you do not need to supervise the process. This trust extends beyond sleep. It reshapes how you relate to control in general. You learn that not everything improves with effort. Some things improve with release. Falling asleep without negotiation also teaches emotional maturity. You accept that some nights will feel restless, some thoughts will linger, and yet you rest anyway. You stop demanding a specific inner state before allowing sleep. This removes performance anxiety from rest. The Stoics practiced acceptance without resignation. They did not fight what could not be changed, nor did they collapse into it. At night, this means accepting the current state of the mind and body without trying to improve it. Improvement comes as a result, not a prerequisite. Over time, this practice becomes embodied. The mind learns that bedtime is not a discussion, it is a transition. Just as you do not negotiate with gravity, you do not negotiate with rest. You align with it. This alignment reduces mental friction. Thoughts slow because they are no longer being engaged. The body relaxes because it is no longer waiting for instruction. Sleep deepens because nothing is resisting it. There is dignity in this kind of rest. You are not begging for sleep. You are choosing it, quietly, firmly, without explanation. And this choice carries into waking life. You become less prone to overthinking decisions, less trapped in internal debates, more comfortable with decisive acceptance. You learn when to stop pushing. The Stoics knew that peace comes from knowing when enough is enough. Falling asleep without negotiation is a nightly practice of that wisdom, a small act with large effects. When the mind finally understands that rest does not require agreement, it lets go. And when it lets go, sleep arrives, not as a reward, not as an escape, but as a natural return to balance. This is how the night ends cleanly, without bargaining, without struggle, just a quiet shift from doing to being. And in that shift, the mind finds the rest it has been arguing itself out of all along. As sleep no longer depends on persuasion or inner debate, a final obstacle often rises to the surface. Not noise, not thought, but resistance. a subtle tension that appears precisely when you decide to be still. This is the moment many people misunderstand. They assume something has gone wrong. The Stoics understood it as part of the training. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the absence of reaction. When the mind resists stillness, it is not because stillness is harmful, but because it is unfamiliar. The mind has been conditioned to equate activity with safety. When activity stops, it searches for something to hold on to. This search feels like restlessness. Most people respond to this resistance by moving again. They shift position. They engage a thought. They check something. Anything to escape the discomfort of not doing. But each time they do this, they reinforce the belief that stillness is unsafe. Mastering stillness means staying when the urge to escape appears. The Stoics believed that the mind reveals its habits most clearly when it is asked to do nothing. During the day, effort hides these habits. At night, they surface. Resistance is simply habit being exposed. It is not a command. It is a signal. When the mind resists stillness, it often creates urgency. Thoughts appear that feel important. Problems suddenly demand attention. Old memories surface with emotion attached. This is not coincidence. It is the mind's attempt to regain control. Stillness removes its usual tools. Resistance is its last strategy. Mastering stillness does not require forcing calm. Force creates more resistance. It requires staying present without reacting. You notice the urge to move. You notice the thought that says, "This isn't working," and you do nothing with it. Not because you are ignoring it, but because you recognize that action is not required. This is difficult at first because the mind is used to being obeyed. When it is not, it escalates. But escalation only works if it produces response. When it does not, the mind begins to slow, not immediately, gradually. The Stoics trained this by practicing endurance of discomfort without judgment, not pain, but unease, the unease of not stimulating, the unease of not fixing, the unease of not escaping. This endurance builds inner strength far more quietly than effort ever could. Stillness also teaches humility. You learn that you do not control the mind through commands. You guide it through consistency. Each night you remain still despite resistance. You teach the mind that nothing bad happens when it is not in charge. There is a moment, often brief, when resistance peaks and then fades. The body exhales. The mind loosens. This moment cannot be forced. It arrives only when resistance is no longer fought. This is the threshold many never cross because they retreat too soon. Mastering stillness means staying past the point of discomfort, not aggressively, patiently, like waiting for a wave to pass instead of running from it. The Stoics believed patience is not passive, it is active restraint. This practice also reshapes your relationship with control. You realize that control does not come from constant intervention. It comes from knowing when intervention is unnecessary. Stillness is proof of that wisdom. As you remain still, sensations may intensify briefly. The body may feel heavy. The breath may feel shallow. Thoughts may flicker. None of this requires correction. These are transitions. The nervous system is recalibrating. Interfering resets the process. Over time, the mind learns that resistance does not produce escape. It learns that stillness is non-negotiable, but safe. This learning is deep because it is experiential. The body remembers it. Mastering stillness also sharpens awareness. Without movement or engagement, you begin to notice subtle shifts. The slowing of breath, the softening of muscles, the space between thoughts. These signs reassure the system that rest is underway. This skill carries into waking life. When discomfort arises, you no longer rush to fix it. You pause, you observe, you choose. This creates emotional resilience. You are less reactive because you have practiced not reacting. The Stoics did not chase comfort, they chased clarity. Stillness offers clarity, but only after resistance is allowed to exhaust itself. This is why mastery cannot be rushed. It is earned through repetition. As nights pass, resistance appears less often. Or when it does, it feels weaker. The mind recognizes the pattern. It knows that stillness will be maintained. This predictability creates calm. Eventually, stillness stops feeling like effort. It becomes familiar, safe, even welcoming. The mind no longer resists because it no longer feels threatened by quiet. This is the final shift. When stillness is no longer an enemy, sleep arrives without struggle. Not because the mind was silenced, but because it no longer needed to defend itself. The Stoics knew that mastery is quiet. It does not announce itself. It reveals itself in moments like this, when the mind wants to move and you choose to remain. In that choice, something deep settles, not just for the night, but for the way you meet life itself. As stillness becomes something you can remain inside without fleeing, the next challenge appears quietly, not as discomfort, but as temptation, a pull towards stimulation, a glow, a sound, a small hit of novelty offered as relief. This is where many nights are lost, not to chaos, but to convenience. Nighttime stimulation feels harmless, a quick scroll, a video to relax, one more piece of information before sleep. But the Stoics would recognize this moment immediately. They would see it not as rest, but as surrender of authority. Because whatever you reach for when nothing is required reveals where power truly lives. Resisting stimulation at night is not about denial. It is about training. Power training, not of the muscles, but of the will. The mind has learned that stimulation equals relief. Over time, this association becomes automatic. Silence triggers discomfort. Stimulation promises escape. The Stoics understood that every time you obey this impulse, you strengthen it, and every time you resist it, you weaken it. Night is the most effective training ground because the stakes are low and the signals are clear. You are not deprived of anything essential. You are simply choosing not to feed a habit. This choice builds a rare kind of strength, the ability to tolerate neutrality without needing distraction. Stimulation keeps the nervous system active. Light, sound, and novelty signal the brain that something important is happening. Even relaxing content keeps the system alert. The body does not know the difference between urgency and entertainment. It only knows activation. When stimulation is resisted, the system learns a new lesson. Nothing is happening, and that is safe. The Stoics believe that freedom is not found in indulgence, but in independence. A mind that needs stimulation to feel okay is not free. It is dependent. Nighttime exposes this dependence clearly. When the world goes quiet, what do you reach for? That answer reveals where power is being outsourced. Resisting stimulation does not require rigid rules. It requires clarity. You are not saying never, you are saying not now. This distinction matters. Power is not absolute control. It is appropriate control. Night is not for consumption. It is for recovery. There is discomfort at first. The mind expects a reward. When it does not arrive, restlessness appears. This is not failure. This is withdrawal. and withdrawal, when faced calmly, is temporary. Each night you resist stimulation, the craving weakens. The mind learns that it can exist without constant input. The Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort to strengthen character, not as punishment but as preparation. Resisting nighttime stimulation is a modern version of this practice. You are not depriving yourself. You are training your ability to choose reason over impulse. This training has consequences beyond sleep. You begin to notice impulses more clearly during the day. You pause before reacting. You question whether something truly needs your attention. The muscle you build at night works everywhere else. There is also dignity in this resistance. You are not numbing yourself at the end of the day. You are respecting your mind enough to let it settle naturally. This sends a powerful message inward. You trust yourself without crutches. Resisting stimulation also protects mental clarity. Nighttime input often leaks into sleep, shaping dreams and emotions. The mind does not process stimulation as neutral. It absorbs tone, tension, and meaning. By limiting input, you protect the inner environment where restoration happens. Over time, the reward shifts. Instead of stimulation bringing relief, stillness does. The mind begins to crave quiet because it associates quiet with safety and rest. This is a reversal of conditioning, and it only happens through consistent resistance. The Stoics did not fear boredom. They feared dependency. Boredom is a sign that the mind is adjusting. Dependency is a sign that it has surrendered autonomy. Nighttime resistance prevents this surrender. There is power in ending the day without consumption. No opinions taken in, no comparisons made, no new desires planted. The mind closes cleanly. Sleep arrives without residue from the outside world. This does not make you rigid or joyless. It makes you selective. You enjoy stimulation when it serves you, not when it controls you. Night becomes a protected space where nothing external gets to shape your inner state. As this practice deepens, you begin to feel something rare, a sense of self-sufficiency. You do not need to be entertained to be okay. You do not need distraction to feel at ease. This is quiet power. The Stoics believed that the strongest person is the one who needs the least. Resisting nighttime stimulation moves you in that direction, not through force, but through choice. And as nights pass, sleep becomes deeper. Not because you exhausted yourself with content, but because you preserved energy by refusing it. The mind rests because it was not pulled in 10 directions before bed. This is power training in its purest form, invisible, private, effective. You do not announce it. You do not measure it. You simply feel it in the way stillness no longer scares you and the way rest comes without negotiation. As the pull of stimulation weakens and stillness becomes familiar, a deeper pattern begins to reveal itself. The night stops feeling separate from the day. What you practice in the dark quietly shapes how you move in the light. Discipline, it turns out, does not begin with ambition or effort. It begins with how you close the day. Most people try to build discipline during the day when energy is high and eyes are watching. They set rules for mornings, goals for work, standards for performance. But by night, those rules soften. Boundaries blur. Habits take over. The Stoics understood something most overlook. The day does not train the night. The night trains the day. Night discipline is discipline without applause, no reward, no urgency, no pressure. This is why it is so effective. When you choose restraint, calm, and order at night, you are not driven by motivation. You are guided by principle, and principle lasts longer than motivation ever could. The mind learns from endings. How something ends determines how it is remembered. If the day ends in chaos, distraction, or excess, the mind carries that disorder forward. If it ends with intention and restraint, the mind wakes oriented toward clarity. Night discipline quietly programs the next day before it begins. This is not about strict routines or perfection. It is about consistency of values, choosing when to stop, choosing what not to consume, choosing to rest instead of escape. These choices build inner trust. The mind learns that you mean what you decide, even when it would be easy not to. Discipline during the day often relies on external structure, meetings, deadlines, social expectations. Night removes all of that. What remains is internal order, or the lack of it. If you can maintain discipline here where nothing forces you, you build a kind of strength that carries everywhere else. The Stoics believed that character is revealed when circumstances remove pressure. Night does exactly that. It strips away obligation and asks, what do you do when nothing is demanded? Do you indulge impulses? Do you avoid yourself? Or do you maintain alignment with what you know is right? Night discipline also teaches delay. You learn that not every urge needs immediate satisfaction. This skill is essential for day discipline. The person who can resist a screen at night can resist distraction at work. The person who can stop thinking at bedtime can stop overthinking in conversation. There is a misconception that discipline is harsh. The Stoics disagreed. They saw discipline as care for the self. Night discipline, especially, is gentle. It is not about forcing productivity. It is about protecting rest. And protected rest becomes energy, focus, and steadiness the next day. When nights are orderly, mornings are easier. You wake without residue, without mental clutter, without regret over how the night was spent. This creates momentum. You begin the day already aligned, instead of needing to recover before you can act. Day discipline built without night discipline often collapses under pressure. It relies too much on willpower, but willpower is fragile when the system is tired. Night discipline strengthens the system itself. It reduces friction. It makes right action feel natural rather than forced. The Stoics understood that habits form most strongly in low-energy states. This is when the true default appears. If your default at night is calm and restraint, your default during the day becomes stability. If your default at night is indulgence and escape, discipline during the day becomes a constant struggle. There is also self-respect in this practice. You treat your time, attention, and rest as valuable even when no one is watching. This respect carries into how you speak, how you decide, how you respond to challenge. You move with more confidence because your inner life is not chaotic. Night discipline is not about control for its own sake. It is about continuity. You are the same person in the dark as you are in the light. There is no split between who you intend to be and who you are when tired. This integrity is rare, and it is powerful. As this integrity grows, discipline stops feeling like effort. You no longer need to push yourself into good habits. They arise naturally because the foundation is stable. Sleep supports energy. Energy supports focus. Focus supports action. The Stoics believe that excellence is built quietly through small, repeated acts that align with reason. Night discipline is one of those acts. Small, repeated, often unnoticed, but it compounds faster than dramatic effort ever could. You may notice that decisions during the day become simpler. You hesitate less. You are less tempted by distraction. This is not because you became stricter, it is because you became clearer. The clarity was built at night. Eventually, the boundary between night and day discipline disappears. They become one continuous practice. You govern yourself when rested, and you govern yourself when tired. This consistency creates calm strength. The day no longer feels like something you must survive before collapsing at night. It feels like something you can move through steadily, knowing it will end cleanly. And the night no longer feels like an escape from discipline. It feels like its source. This is why the Stoics placed so much importance on how life is lived in private. They knew that what is practiced in silence becomes visible everywhere else. Night discipline does not demand effort. It demands honesty, and once it is established, it quietly becomes the root from which all other discipline grows, steady, grounded, and unshaken by circumstance. As discipline settles into the night and no longer feels forced, a deeper question naturally arises. Why did those with the greatest responsibility, the widest power, and the heaviest burdens place so little importance on comfort when they rested? Why did kings, commanders, and stoic rulers sleep simply, even when luxury was available? Comfort addiction weakens authority. The Stoics understood this clearly. Comfort is not dangerous by itself, but dependence on comfort is. When rest requires perfect conditions, the mind becomes fragile. It learns that peace is external, conditional, and easily disrupted. A ruler who needs ideal circumstances to rest cannot remain steady when circumstances turn hostile. Kings who slept without excess comfort were not denying themselves pleasure. They were preserving independence. They knew that if the body demanded softness to recover, it would also demand softness when faced with hardship. Comfort trains expectation. Expectation trains disappointment. The Stoics believed that strength begins where unnecessary comfort ends. Sleeping without indulgence kept the nervous system adaptable. The body learned to rest anywhere. The mind learned not to panic when conditions were imperfect. This adaptability was not accidental. It was cultivated deliberately. Comfort addiction often disguises itself as self-care. Extra pillows, constant stimulation, background noise, endless rituals designed to soothe. These habits may feel harmless, but they quietly teach the mind that rest is fragile, that peace must be engineered, that discomfort is intolerable. The Stoics rejected this lesson. They understood that rest does not come from softness alone. It comes from safety inside. A king who could rest on a simple bed knew something deeper than luxury could provide. He knew that calm was not dependent on surroundings. It was anchored in reason. Sleeping without comfort addiction also preserved clarity. Excess comfort dulls awareness. It wraps the mind in distraction. Simple rest sharpens perception. The Stoics valued clarity more than indulgence. They chose conditions that supported alert calm rather than emotional sedation. There is also humility in simple rest. Kings who slept plainly reminded themselves that power does not make one exempt from nature. The body still needs sleep. The mind still needs quiet. Comfort does not replace wisdom. This humility kept arrogance in check and judgment clear. Comfort addiction creates fear of loss. If peace depends on softness, silence, or stimulation, then any disruption becomes threatening. The Stoics trained themselves to sleep with minimal requirements so that rest could not be taken away by circumstance. This training had practical consequences. When travel was required, sleep followed. When danger was near, rest still came. When conditions were harsh, recovery remained possible. This resilience is impossible when comfort becomes a requirement. Modern life encourages the opposite. Sleep is marketed as an experience. Perfect mattresses, perfect sounds, perfect routines. While some comfort supports rest, dependence weakens it. The Stoics would ask a simple question: can you rest when conditions are not ideal? If not, comfort has become a ruler. Kings who slept without comfort addiction were not punishing themselves. They were training sovereignty. They were ensuring that rest served them, not the other way around. They slept to restore function, not to escape sensation. This simplicity also shortened the distance between rest and action. There was no elaborate transition, no dependency on ritual. When it was time to sleep, they slept. When it was time to rise, they rose. This efficiency preserved energy and focus. Comfort addiction blurs this boundary. It turns rest into a craving. Sleep becomes something to chase rather than something to enter. The mind becomes attached to the feeling of comfort instead of the function of rest. The Stoics believed that freedom is the ability to remain unaffected by what is unnecessary. Comfort becomes unnecessary when the mind is trained. This does not mean rejecting comfort entirely. It means not needing it. There is quiet power in lying down without demanding perfection. The body settles because it has learned to. The mind quiets because it trusts itself. This trust is earned through repeated exposure to simplicity. Over time, resisting comfort addiction builds confidence. You realize you can rest even when the world is noisy, uncertain, or imperfect. This confidence follows you into waking life. You become less dependent on ideal conditions to perform well. Kings slept without comfort addiction because they understood responsibility. They could not afford fragility. They could not allow rest to be stolen by inconvenience. Their authority depended on consistency, not indulgence. This practice also protects mental discipline. Excess comfort often invites excess thought. The mind drifts. It indulges. Simpler conditions support stillness. They make it easier to remain present without stimulation. As nights pass, the reward reveals itself. Sleep becomes deeper, not because it is cushioned, but because it is uncomplicated. The body does not brace. The mind does not negotiate. Rest arrives as a natural process. The Stoics did not chase pleasure at night. They chased restoration. And restoration does not require luxury. It requires alignment. When you release comfort addiction, you reclaim authority over rest. You no longer need perfect silence, perfect temperature, perfect conditions. You need only permission to stop. This is why kings slept simply. Not because they lacked access to comfort, but because they understood its cost. They chose resilience over indulgence, strength over softness, sovereignty over dependency. And in that choice, they preserved the one thing no luxury could guarantee: the ability to rest anywhere, anytime, with a mind that remains unshaken. As comfort loses its grip and rest becomes simple again, the ego finally loosens its hold. This is the moment the Stoics valued most. When identity is quiet, when defenses are lowered, when the mind is no longer busy protecting an image. In this quiet state, something rare becomes possible. Courage can be trained without resistance. Most people think courage is built through action alone, through confrontation, through pushing past fear in daylight. The Stoics understood another layer. They knew that fear is not only a reaction to events, but a habit stored in the mind and body. And habits can be reshaped most deeply when the ego is not interfering. The ego resists change. It protects stories about who you are and what you can handle. During the day, it argues, doubts, compares, and defends. At night, especially in deep rest, this guard relaxes. The mind becomes more open, more impressionable. This is not weakness, it is opportunity. Programming courage while the ego sleeps does not mean forcing positive thoughts or repeating slogans. That approach keeps the ego active. Instead, it means allowing the nervous system and subconscious to experience safety in stillness. Courage grows when fear is no longer rehearsed. Fear survives through repetition. Each time you mentally relive danger, failure, or embarrassment, the body treats it as practice. At night, when the ego is quiet, you can stop feeding these rehearsals. When fear is not replayed, it begins to fade. The Stoics believed courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to meet fear with reason. At night, reason does not argue. It simply rests. And in that rest, the body learns that nothing terrible is happening. This lesson is subtle but powerful. Safety experienced without effort becomes the foundation of courage. When you sleep calmly, the nervous system records it. It learns that darkness is not a threat, that stillness is not danger, that letting go does not lead to harm. These lessons are stored deeper than conscious thought. Over time, they change how fear shows up during the day. Programming courage also means what you do not do at night. You do not replay threats. You do not plan defenses. You do not scan for problems. Each of these behaviors teaches the mind that danger is near. When you refuse to engage in them, you teach the opposite. The ego believes it must stay alert to protect you. When you show it, night after night, that rest does not lead to disaster, its grip weakens. The body becomes calmer. The mind becomes steadier. Courage begins to feel natural instead of forced. There is also a moral aspect to this practice. Courage, for the Stoics, was tied to honesty, facing reality without distortion. At night, reality is simple. You are safe. You are breathing. You are allowed to rest. Accepting this truth without resistance trains the mind to accept other truths more easily. This training carries forward. When a challenge appears during the day, the body remembers calm. It does not escalate immediately. You pause. You breathe. You respond. This pause is courage in action. Programming courage while the ego sleeps also reduces anticipation anxiety. Many fears are about what might happen. At night, nothing is happening. When the mind rests without rehearsing the future, it learns that uncertainty is survivable. This lesson weakens fear's hold. The Stoics trusted nature. They believed the body knows how to recover when not interfered with. Courage emerges from this recovery. A rested system is braver than an exhausted one. A calm mind is more resilient than a tense one. This is why sleep was sacred to them, not as escape, but as preparation. While the ego sleeps, deeper layers of the mind recalibrate. They release excess vigilance. They reset thresholds for fear. They restore balance. You may notice that after nights of deep rest, challenges feel smaller. Words hurt less. Pressure feels manageable. This is not coincidence. Courage has been quietly reinforced. This process cannot be rushed. It happens through consistency, through nights where you choose rest over rumination, where you allow the ego to stand down without replacing it with effort. Over time, courage becomes a background state rather than a performance. The Stoics did not seek adrenaline-driven bravery. They sought steady courage, the kind that does not announce itself, the kind that remains when no one is watching. Night trains this better than any speech or mantra ever could. As ego loosens, fear loses its audience. Without attention, it quiets. Without rehearsal, it weakens. Courage grows not because you fought fear, but because you stopped feeding it. Eventually, you wake up with a different posture toward life. Not reckless, not detached, but grounded. You trust yourself more. You trust your capacity to face what comes. This trust was not built through struggle. It was built through rest. This is the quiet power of the night. While the world sleeps, while the ego rests, the deeper mind learns. It learns safety. It learns calm. It learns that you are capable of letting go and returning whole. And from that learning, courage rises naturally, not as a reaction, but as a state. One that follows you into the day, steady and unforced, ready for whatever stands in front of you. As courage begins to take root without effort, another change quietly unfolds. Calm stops feeling like something you visit once in a while and starts feeling like something you carry. This is not accidental. It is the result of repetition. Night after night, the mind is being taught what normal feels like. The mind learns through exposure, not through logic, not through motivation, through repetition. Whatever state you return to most often becomes familiar. Whatever becomes familiar becomes safe. And whatever feels safe becomes the default. This is how calm is implanted, not through a single perfect night, but through many ordinary ones. Most people experience calm as a break from tension, a rare pause, something fragile that disappears when life becomes difficult. The Stoics understood calm differently. For them, calm was a trained condition, something practiced until it no longer needed effort. Night was their training ground. Each night you rest without urgency, you show the nervous system a clear pattern. Darkness arrives, the body slows, the mind stands down, nothing bad happens. This sequence repeated consistently rewires expectation. Calm stops being an exception and starts becoming the rule. Repetition matters because the mind does not trust words. You can tell yourself to relax 1,000 times, but if your nights are filled with tension, the body learns tension. Calm is implanted when the body experiences it repeatedly without interruption. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. One deep night of rest does not undo years of alertness, but many nights of gentle calm do. Each night builds on the last, even when progress feels invisible. The Stoics did not demand perfect stillness. They allowed imperfection. What mattered was returning to calm again and again. This return is the repetition that trains the system. Even if the mind wanders, returning without frustration reinforces calm. At night, the mind is more open to learning because defenses are lower. This makes repetition especially powerful. Whatever state you allow the mind to remain in before sleep leaves an imprint. Over time, these imprints accumulate. Implanting calm also means removing behaviors that interrupt it. Stimulation, rumination, emotional rehearsal. Each of these teaches the nervous system to stay active. When they are reduced night after night, calm has space to grow. There is a patience required here. Calm does not announce itself. It settles quietly. You may only notice it when something that used to disturb you no longer does. A thought passes without pulling you in. A noise fades without irritation. A delay does not trigger anxiety. These are signs the implantation is working. The Stoics believed that the mind becomes what it repeatedly practices. Night practice is powerful because it is uninterrupted by social pressure. You are not performing calm, you are living it. Over time, the body begins to anticipate rest. Muscles relax sooner. Breathing deepens faster. Thoughts slow without effort. These are not conscious achievements, they are learned responses. Repetition also creates trust. The nervous system learns that you will not abandon it to chaos at night. This trust reduces baseline stress. When stress is lower, calm becomes easier to access even during the day. This is how calm becomes durable, not dependent on circumstances, not shattered by small disruptions. It becomes a background state, always present even when challenged. Implanting calm does not mean eliminating emotion. Emotions still arise, but they move through a calmer system. They do not overwhelm. They do not linger unnecessarily. Calm acts as a container. The Stoics understood that resilience is built in quiet moments, not dramatic ones. Night repetition builds a resilience that feels like ease. You do not tense before challenges. You meet them grounded. This calm also changes decision-making. You act with less haste. You speak with more clarity. You listen better. These qualities are not trained directly. They emerge naturally from a calmer nervous system. Each night you choose stillness over stimulation, acceptance over rumination, rest over rehearsal. You reinforce calm. The mind keeps score. It remembers. Eventually, calm no longer feels like something you are trying to achieve. It feels like home. You return to it without effort because you have been there so many times before. The Stoics trusted this process. They did not rush it. They did not demand results. They practiced quietly, knowing that repetition reshapes character. Night after night, calm is implanted, layer by layer, without force, without struggle. Until one day, you realize that what once felt difficult now feels natural. This is the quiet transformation the night offers. You do not wake up a different person overnight. You wake up steadier, and that steadiness accumulates. Through repetition, calm stops being a response and becomes a foundation. From that foundation, everything else becomes easier. Thought, action, rest. And it all begins the same way each night, by returning once again to stillness. As calm becomes familiar and no longer needs to be chased, a deeper capacity begins to form. You stop needing everything to feel easy before you can rest. Discomfort may still appear, but it no longer feels threatening. This is where sleep becomes something more than recovery. It becomes training. Most people believe discomfort is a problem to solve, something to escape, numb, or eliminate before peace can exist. The Stoics saw discomfort differently. They saw it as a natural part of being alive, not an enemy, but a condition to be understood and normalized. Sleep, when approached correctly, is one of the safest places to do this. At night, discomfort often shows up in subtle ways. An uneasy feeling in the chest, a restless body, a sense that something is unresolved. The instinct is to fix it, shift position, distract the mind, add stimulation. But every time discomfort is avoided, the nervous system learns a dangerous lesson. Discomfort equals danger. Using sleep to normalize discomfort means staying present with mild unease without reacting to it. Not to suffer, not to endure heroically, but to allow the body to experience discomfort without escalation. This teaches the system something powerful. Discomfort can exist without harm. The Stoics believed that resilience is built through exposure, not avoidance. They practiced voluntary discomfort during the day to strengthen character. At night, the same principle applies, but in a gentler form. You are not forcing cold or hunger. You are allowing the natural discomfort of stillness to exist without fleeing. This practice rewires fear. Much of what we call anxiety is not fear of pain, but fear of discomfort. The fear of feeling uneasy, the fear of not being soothed immediately. When you sleep while discomfort is present and nothing bad happens, the fear weakens. The body learns through experience, not explanation. You can tell yourself that discomfort is safe, but the nervous system only believes what it survives. Night after night, resting without fixing every sensation teaches the body that it does not need to react to every signal. This does not mean ignoring pain or serious discomfort. It means recognizing the difference between danger and unease. Mild discomfort, restlessness, emotional heaviness, these are not threats. They are sensations passing through a system that is learning to be still. The Stoics emphasized accepting what cannot be changed in the moment. At night, many things cannot be changed. The day is over. Conversations are done. Outcomes are sealed. Trying to eliminate discomfort here is wasted effort. Accepting it conserves energy. As you normalize discomfort during sleep, your tolerance expands. You become less reactive to sensations, less alarmed by emotional waves. You stop interpreting every internal shift as a problem. This creates deep calm, not because discomfort disappears, but because it no longer controls you. There is also humility in this practice. You accept that life does not always feel smooth. You stop demanding constant ease. This acceptance reduces suffering far more effectively than resistance ever could. Using sleep to normalize discomfort also prevents overcorrection. Many people overstimulate at night because they cannot tolerate unease. This leads to shallow sleep and heightened sensitivity the next day. By allowing discomfort instead, sleep becomes deeper and recovery more complete. The Stoics understood that comfort weakens when it becomes a requirement. Discomfort strengthens when it is accepted. Night offers a daily opportunity to practice this truth in a low-risk environment. Over time, discomfort loses its sharp edge. You notice sensations without immediately labeling them as bad. This shift reduces baseline anxiety. The body no longer scans constantly for relief. It trusts that it can handle what arises. This trust carries into waking life. When something feels uncomfortable during the day, you do not panic. You recognize the feeling. You stay present. You respond with reason instead of urgency. This is emotional resilience built quietly during sleep. Normalizing discomfort also strengthens patience. You learn that not everything needs immediate resolution. Some things soften on their own when given time. Sleep teaches this lesson repeatedly. The Stoics believed that inner freedom comes from not being ruled by aversion. When discomfort no longer dictates behavior, freedom expands. Sleep becomes a place where this freedom is rehearsed nightly. There may be nights when discomfort feels stronger. This is not regression, it is opportunity. Each time you remain present without escape, you reinforce the lesson. Nothing is wrong. Nothing needs to be fixed right now. Eventually, you stop fearing the feeling of unease. You recognize it as temporary. This recognition changes everything. Fear feeds on avoidance. Courage grows through familiarity. Using sleep to normalize discomfort does not make you rigid or insensitive. It makes you grounded. You feel more, but you are disturbed less. You become steady in the presence of sensation. This is why the Stoics valued rest not just for recovery, but for training. Night shapes the nervous system in ways the day cannot. In stillness, without distraction, the deepest lessons are learned. As nights pass, you may notice something unexpected. Discomfort still appears, but it no longer feels personal. It no longer feels urgent. It is simply part of experience. From this place, rest deepens. Not because everything feels good, but because nothing feels intolerable. This is the quiet strength sleep can build. The ability to remain at ease even when ease is absent. And once this strength is learned in the dark, it does not disappear in the light. As discomfort becomes familiar and no longer alarming, the emotional system begins to settle into a new rhythm. Feelings still arise, but they do not demand immediate loyalty. They no longer rush you toward reaction. This is the doorway to emotional neutrality. Not emptiness, not coldness, but balance. Emotional neutrality is often misunderstood. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the absence of emotional domination. The Stoics did not aim to feel nothing. They aimed to feel without losing command. Night is where this training becomes most effective because emotions surface when defenses are low. During the day, emotions are shaped by context. Roles, expectations, and urgency influence how you feel and how you respond. At night, context falls away. What remains are raw emotional residues, subtle moods, quiet tension, faint sadness, or lingering irritation. Conditioning neutrality means allowing these states to exist without adding fuel. Most people unknowingly train emotional extremes. They amplify excitement, dwell on frustration, replay anxiety. Each repetition strengthens the emotional circuit. Night offers a chance to interrupt this training. When emotion arises and is met with stillness instead of engagement, the system learns moderation. The Stoics believed emotions are judgments in motion, not facts, but interpretations felt in the body. When you stop reacting to them, you stop reinforcing those judgments. Emotional neutrality emerges when emotions are allowed to pass without agreement or resistance. This conditioning happens gradually. One neutral response does little. Repeated neutrality reshapes the baseline. Each night you feel something without acting on it. You teach the mind that emotion does not equal instruction. Over time, emotions lose urgency. They soften. They pass more quickly. Neutrality is deeply calming for the nervous system. Emotional spikes keep the body alert. Neutrality signals safety. The body learns that it does not need to mobilize for every internal shift. This reduces overall stress and improves sleep quality naturally. At night, neutrality is easier because there is nothing to respond to, no one to impress, no problem to solve. Emotions arise in a quiet space where you can simply observe. This observation weakens emotional momentum. The Stoics practiced emotional neutrality to preserve clarity. Strong emotions distort perception. They exaggerate threat and reward. Neutrality restores proportion. A problem becomes a problem, not a catastrophe. A success becomes pleasant, not defining. Conditioning neutrality does not mean suppressing emotion. Suppression tightens emotion and stores it. Neutrality allows emotion to move without obstruction. You feel it fully, but briefly. There is no internal commentary to prolong it. This practice also dissolves emotional habits. Many emotions repeat not because of current events, but because they have been rehearsed. Nighttime neutrality interrupts rehearsal. Without repetition, the habit weakens. Neutrality also builds patience. You stop needing immediate emotional resolution. You trust that feelings will shift on their own. This trust reduces anxiety and improves emotional regulation during the day. The Stoics believed that inner freedom comes from choosing responses rather than being carried by impulses. Emotional neutrality creates this freedom. You are not numb, you are selective. Over time, this conditioning changes how emotions feel. They become lighter, less sticky. They no longer define your mood for hours or days. They pass like weather instead of settling like climate. Nighttime neutrality also improves decision-making. When emotions are not amplified, thoughts become clearer. You wake with less emotional residue, making the morning calmer and more focused. This neutrality also protects relationships. Emotional overreaction often damages connection. By conditioning neutrality at night, you reduce the likelihood of reacting impulsively during the day. You respond with more balance. There is dignity in neutrality. You are not pulled into drama, internal or external. You maintain composure not through effort, but through habit. This composure is quiet, but powerful. The Stoics did not see neutrality as detachment from life. They saw it as alignment with reality. Life contains pleasure and pain. Neutrality allows you to meet both without losing yourself. Conditioning emotional neutrality is a long-term practice. It is built through consistency, not force. Each night offers a small opportunity. Feel without reacting. Observe without judgment. Rest without emotional commentary. As this practice deepens, sleep becomes steadier. Emotional dreams soften. Nighttime awakenings decrease. The body rests because it is no longer processing amplified emotion. Eventually, neutrality becomes the default. You still feel joy, sadness, and concern, but they do not overwhelm. They inform without commanding. This balance is rare and valuable. The Stoics believed that the wise person is not untouched by emotion, but unruled by it. Night is where this wisdom is quietly practiced. In stillness, without distraction, you learn that emotion does not need obedience. From this learning, calm deepens, courage steadies, discomfort loses its sting, and sleep becomes not just rest, but refinement. Emotional neutrality does not make life dull, it makes it clear, and clarity, once learned in the dark, carries into every moment that follows. As emotions settle into balance and no longer pull you in every direction, something deeper begins to form beneath awareness. A quiet confidence. Not the kind that announces itself, but the kind that holds steady when no one is watching. This is self-trust, and the night is where it is encoded most deeply. Self-trust is not optimism. It is not positive thinking. It is the belief rooted in experience that you can handle what arises without abandoning yourself. Many people lack this not because they are incapable, but because they have never given their inner world consistent proof. Sleep offers that proof in its purest form. During the day, trust is often outsourced to routines, to reassurance, to external validation. At night, none of that is available. When you lie in the dark and choose stillness over escape, presence over distraction, you send a powerful message inward. I can be with myself without needing support from the outside. The subconscious listens more than the conscious mind realizes. It does not respond to affirmations or logic. It responds to patterns, repetition, behavior. Each night you respond calmly to thoughts, emotions, or discomfort. The subconscious records evidence. Evidence that you are reliable, that you do not panic, that you do not disappear when things feel uncertain. This is how self-trust is encoded, not through promises, but through consistency. When the mind quiets at night, and you do not rush to fill the silence, the subconscious learns that silence is safe. When fear appears and you do not dramatize it, the subconscious learns that fear does not require action. When restlessness arises and you remain still, the subconscious learns that you can tolerate uncertainty. Most people unknowingly encode the opposite. They teach the subconscious that discomfort must be avoided, that thoughts must be solved immediately, that emotions must be soothed externally. Over time, this creates dependence and self-doubt. The system learns, I cannot handle this on my own. The Stoics understood that trust in oneself is built through exposure to inner experience without collapse. Night provides that exposure gently, without risk. You are not facing a crisis. You are simply being present with yourself. Encoding self-trust also changes how the body responds. A trusted leader calms those who follow. When the subconscious begins to trust you, the nervous system relaxes. Muscles soften faster. Breathing deepens naturally. Sleep becomes less fragile because the system no longer expects abandonment. Self-trust also reduces mental noise. Much of overthinking comes from doubt. Doubt that you will remember something. Doubt that you will handle tomorrow. Doubt that you are prepared. When trust is present, the mind stops rehearsing. It knows you will deal with things when the time comes. This trust is not blind. It is grounded. You trust yourself because you have repeatedly shown yourself steadiness at night. You have stayed present. You have not run. The subconscious counts these moments. The Stoics believed that character is formed by what we do repeatedly in private. Encoding self-trust is a direct result of this principle. No one sees your nights. No one rewards your restraint. But the inner system notices everything. At night, when you end the day cleanly, release narratives, resist stimulation, and allow rest, you teach the subconscious that you are dependable, that you will not overload it with unnecessary work, that you respect its limits. This respect creates loyalty. The subconscious begins to cooperate instead of resist. Fear softens. Emotional spikes reduce. Sleep deepens. Not because life is easier, but because you are trusted to handle it. Over time, this trust carries into waking life. When challenges arise, you feel less urgency, less panic. You do not need immediate reassurance because something inside already believes in you. This belief is calm, not loud. Self-trust also reduces the need for control. When you trust yourself, you do not micromanage outcomes. You do not over-prepare. You act when needed and rest when not. This balance preserves energy and clarity. The Stoics did not seek certainty about the future. They sought confidence in their response. Encoding self-trust at night builds exactly that. You may not know what tomorrow brings, but you trust your ability to meet it. This trust is deeply stabilizing. It becomes a psychological anchor. When external things shake, something inside remains steady. That steadiness was not built through struggle. It was built through quiet nights of consistency. Encoding self-trust does not require perfection. Some nights will be restless. Some thoughts will linger. What matters is not control, but return. Each time you return to calm, you reinforce trust. The subconscious does not judge progress. It registers patterns. And the pattern of returning, again and again, matters more than flawless execution. Eventually, self-trust becomes embodied. You feel it as ease, as confidence without arrogance, as calm without effort. You stop questioning your ability to cope. You know because you have practiced. The Stoics believed that the greatest security comes from within, not because the world is safe, but because you are stable. Sleep becomes the place where this stability is renewed nightly. As self-trust deepens, rest becomes effortless. The mind does not need to stay alert. The body does not brace. You fall asleep not because you are exhausted, but because you are settled. And when you wake, that trust comes with you. Quiet, strong, unshaken. This is the hidden gift of the night. While the world sleeps, something essential is being written beneath awareness. Not a story, not a promise, but a knowing. You can handle yourself, and that knowing changes everything. As self-trust settles beneath awareness, the mind begins to open another door, one that most people rush past or misunderstand. The door of dreams, not as messages to decode or stories to cling to, but as movements of the mind that can be witnessed without attachment. Dreams feel personal because they borrow your memories, faces, fears, and desires. When you wake from them, emotion often lingers. Relief, anxiety, sadness, confusion. Many people carry this emotional residue into the morning without realizing it. The Stoics took a different approach. They observed dreams without emotional ownership. To observe without ownership means this: the dream happened, but it does not belong to you in the way the mind assumes. It is not a command. It is not a prophecy. It is not a verdict on who you are. It is activity, not identity. The mind continues working during sleep, sorting, releasing, combining fragments. Dreams are part of that process. They are not meant to be taken personally. Emotional ownership turns them into something they were never meant to be, meaningful judgments rather than neutral movements. When you wake from a dream and immediately react, the emotional system stays active. The body responds as if something real occurred. Heart rate rises, muscles tighten, mood shifts. Observing without ownership interrupts this chain. The Stoics believe that not every impression deserves belief. Dreams are impressions at their most unfiltered. When you witness them calmly, you teach the mind that internal images do not automatically require emotional response. This does not mean suppressing feeling. If emotion is present, you allow it, but you do not explain it. You do not attach a story. You do not ask what it says about you. You simply notice it, the same way you would notice weather passing through the sky. There is freedom in this. You stop waking up already entangled in inner drama. The day begins cleaner, lighter, less reactive. Many people unknowingly rehearse fear through dreams by emotionally engaging with them after waking. A stressful dream becomes a stressful morning. Observing without ownership prevents this rehearsal. The nervous system resets instead of escalating. The Stoics trained themselves to distinguish between events and judgments. A dream is an event. Emotional ownership is a judgment. Removing the judgment dissolves unnecessary suffering. This practice also weakens identification with the subconscious. You stop believing that everything produced by the mind defines you. You recognize that the mind generates content constantly, most of it without intention or meaning. Dreams often exaggerate. They distort. They dramatize. Taking them literally reinforces emotional extremes. Observing them calmly restores proportion. There is also humility here. You accept that not everything that happens inside you requires interpretation. Some things are simply part of the system releasing tension. When you let that process complete without interference, emotional clarity improves. Over time, dreams change, not because you control them, but because the emotional charge attached to them fades. Nightmares lose intensity. Repetitive dreams weaken. The mind no longer needs to shout to be heard. This is especially important for those who tend to overthink. Emotional ownership of dreams feeds rumination. Letting go protects mental energy. The Stoics understood that peace comes from not adding unnecessary meaning. Dreams offer daily practice in this restraint. You see something strange, intense, or unsettling, and you do not react.
This strengthens emotional neutrality. The system learns that images alone are not threats. This learning carries into waking life. Thoughts lose their power faster. Mental imagery becomes less persuasive.
Observing dreams without ownership also deepens self-trust. You trust that your mind can process without supervision. You do not need to manage every inner experience. This trust allows deeper rest. There is a subtle confidence that grows from this. You wake without needing to interpret yourself. You begin the day grounded rather than introspective. This does not mean ignoring dreams entirely. It means relating to them wisely. You notice patterns without obsession. You acknowledge emotion without feeding it. You move on without dragging the night into the day. The Stoics believed that the wise person is not disturbed by internal movement. Dreams are internal movement. When you let them pass without claim, you remain steady. Over time, mornings become quieter. The emotional tone of the day becomes more stable. You are less likely to wake already reacting to something that no longer exists. This practice also reinforces presence. You return attention to what is real now, not what appeared in sleep. The body is here. The breath is here. The day begins here. Observing dreams without emotional ownership is a small practice with large effects. It protects the transition between night and day. It preserves the calm you have been cultivating. The night has already done its work. There is no need to reopen it. When you let dreams pass like clouds, the mind learns something important. It does not need to hold on to everything it creates. And from that learning, another layer of freedom settles in. You sleep, you dream, you wake, and you remain whole, undisturbed, and ready to meet the day as it is. As dreams are allowed to pass without being claimed, even the darker ones begin to change. What once felt threatening starts to feel instructive. Nightmares, when approached with clarity, lose their power to wound. They become something else entirely, a place where fear can finally loosen its grip. Most people treat nightmares as enemies. They wake shaken, tense, sometimes afraid to fall back asleep. The body reacts as if danger is still present. But the Stoics would pause here and ask a deeper question. What if fear, when safely experienced, can be unlearned? Fear extinction is not about eliminating fear through force. It is about teaching the nervous system that fear can exist without harm. Nightmares offer this lesson in the purest form because the threat is intense but not real. The body feels fear, yet nothing happens. This gap between sensation and consequence is where healing occurs. When a nightmare ends and you wake up, the instinct is to push it away, to distract, to reassure yourself quickly. But doing this teaches the body that fear must be escaped. Fear extinction requires something quieter, staying present long enough for the system to learn that it survived. The Stoics believed that fear is strengthened by avoidance and weakened by understanding. A nightmare is fear expressed without danger. If you allow the body to settle without dramatizing the experience, the nervous system updates its response. It learns that fear does not always mean threat. This does not mean reliving the nightmare or analyzing it. That would feed fear. It means noticing the sensations that remain, racing heart, tight chest, shallow breath, and allowing them to resolve naturally. No judgment, no story, just observation. Each time you do this, You interrupt fear's pattern. The body expects panic to lead to harm. When harm does not follow, the expectation weakens. This is extinction. Fear loses its predictive power. Nightmares often repeat because fear has not been resolved. The mind returns to what it believes is unfinished. When fear is met calmly, the mind no longer needs to repeat the signal. The nightmare fades or changes. The Stoics practice this principle in waking life by facing discomfort voluntarily. Nightmares offer the same training without risk. You experience fear in a controlled environment. The body learns resilience while the ego sleeps. It is important not to label yourself as weak for having nightmares. They are not failures. They are expressions of stored fear seeking release. When you meet them with steadiness, you complete that release. Fear extinction through nightmares also reshapes your relationship with fear during the day. You stop fearing the feeling of fear. You recognize it as a sensation, not a verdict. This reduces anxiety and increases courage. Many people fear sleep because of nightmares, but when nightmares are reframed as training, sleep becomes safer. You trust that even if fear appears, you can handle it. This trust reduces the likelihood of nightmares in the first place. The Stoics understood that courage is built by surviving fear without collapse. Nightmares provide this opportunity without consequence. You wake, you breathe, you remain intact. Over time, fear loses intensity. Nightmares become less vivid. When they do appear, they feel distant, less convincing. The mind no longer needs to scream to be heard. This process also deepens self-trust. You see that you can face fear without running. You do not need to suppress or escape. You remain present. This presence is the opposite of panic. There is also compassion in this approach. You do not blame yourself for fear. You allow it to move through. This kindness softens the nervous system, making extinction easier. The Stoics believed that suffering comes from adding judgment to sensation. Nightmares are sensation amplified by imagination. When judgment is removed, suffering decreases, even if sensation remains. Turning nightmares into fear extinction does not require bravery in the dramatic sense. It requires patience. The patience to stay with discomfort long enough for it to teach you something new. Each time you wake from a nightmare and choose calm over reaction, you take power away from fear, not by fighting it, but by outlasting it. This practice changes the emotional tone of sleep. The mind no longer dreads the night. It knows that even fear can be handled. This knowledge brings peace. Eventually, nightmares lose their role. Fear has been integrated. The signal is no longer needed. And when fear no longer needs to announce itself at night, it becomes easier to face it during the day. You respond with clarity instead of avoidance, with steadiness instead of urgency. The Stoics did not seek a life without fear. They sought a life where fear did not rule. Nightmares, when approached wisely, become allies in this goal. They show you what fear feels like and teach you that you can remain whole inside it. From that lesson, something powerful emerges. A calm that does not depend on comfort. A courage that does not need noise. And sleep, once disturbed by fear, becomes a place where fear finally learns to let go. As fear loosens its grip and the night no longer feels hostile, something quieter begins to unfold. The images that pass through sleep start to feel less urgent, less demanding. Dreams still come, but they no longer cling. This is where a deeper lesson emerges, non-attachment, taught gently through imagery that appears and fades on its own. Dream imagery is fleeting by nature. Scenes change without warning. Faces appear and vanish. Events feel intense, then dissolve completely. The Stoics would have recognized this as a perfect teacher. Dreams show, again and again, how little control we have over what appears and how little we need to hold on to it. Non-attachment does not mean indifference. It means not clinging, not insisting that what appears must stay, must mean something, must define you. During the day, attachment is reinforced constantly. We attach to outcomes, opinions, identities, emotions. At night, dream imagery shows another way. Everything comes and goes without permission. When you learn to observe dream imagery without chasing it, you practice letting go without loss. You see that images can be vivid without being owned, emotional without being carried forward. This lesson transfers directly into waking life. Most people wake from dreams and immediately grab onto them. They analyze, they worry, they interpret. This is attachment in action. The Stoic approach is simpler. You notice the imagery and allow it to dissolve, just as it already wants to. Dreams do not ask to be held. They ask to be witnessed and released. When you allow this release, the mind learns something important. Not everything that appears requires engagement. This learning reduces mental clinging everywhere else. Non-attachment through dream imagery also softens emotional charge. Dreams often exaggerate desire, fear, regret, or hope. When you do not attach meaning to these images, the emotions lose their grip. You stop rehearsing longing and loss. The Stoics believed suffering grows from attachment to things outside our control. Dream imagery makes this visible. You cannot control what appears. You cannot change the story. Yet nothing terrible happens when you let it go. This is a powerful lesson for the subconscious. Over time, observing dream imagery without attachment trains the mind to release more easily. Thoughts during the day become less sticky. Emotional reactions pass faster. You no longer feel compelled to hold on to every internal experience. There is freedom in this. You begin to trust impermanence instead of fearing it. You see that letting go does not lead to emptiness, but to space. Space brings calm. Non-attachment also reduces identity fixation. Dreams often place you in roles that feel real for a moment, then vanish. When you wake and do not cling, you remember that identity itself is fluid, useful, but not fixed. This insight loosens the grip of self-judgment. The Stoics taught that we suffer when we confuse what happens with who we are. Dreams make this confusion obvious. You can be brave, foolish, afraid, powerful, all in one night. None of it defines you. Learning this at night makes it easier to remember during the day. This practice also restores presence. When you do not drag dream imagery into the morning, you arrive in the day cleanly. You meet reality as it is, not through the lens of lingering symbols or emotions. Non-attachment through dreams also supports emotional neutrality. You experience intensity without ownership. This builds resilience. You feel without clinging. You care without grasping. The Stoics did not reject imagination. They rejected bondage to it. Dreams are imagination at its purest. When you allow them to pass, you reclaim inner freedom. There is also peace in trusting the mind's process. Dreams sort and release material you do not need to consciously manage. When you attach, you interrupt this process. When you release, you allow completion. Over time, dreams become quieter, less dramatic. Not because you suppress them, but because the mind no longer needs to exaggerate to get attention. Non-attachment reduces the volume. This practice strengthens detachment in waking life. When events unfold unexpectedly, you are less shaken. You recognize the pattern. Things appear. Things pass. You remain. The Stoics believed that tranquility comes from aligning with change, not resisting it. Dream imagery is constant change. Learning from it trains the mind to flow instead of grip. Each night offers many chances to practice this lesson. Each image that fades is an invitation to let go. You do not need to force release. The image dissolves on its own if you do not chase it. Eventually, non-attachment becomes natural. You stop holding tightly to thoughts, emotions, and stories. You engage when needed and release when done. This does not make life dull. It makes it light. You move through experience without dragging it behind you. As nights pass, this lightness follows you into the day. You respond instead of cling. You care without anxiety. You rest without mental residue. Dream imagery becomes a quiet teacher, showing you again and again that nothing needs to be held forever. And in learning this, you discover a deeper calm, one that does not depend on control, one that trusts the passing nature of all things. This is non-attachment, learned without effort, practiced in sleep, and carried gently into life. As non-attachment becomes familiar, and the mind learns to let images pass without holding them, another realization quietly forms. In dreams, control feels real, but only for a moment. You try to run, speak, change the scene, or stop what is happening, and often you cannot. Or you believe you can, until the dream shifts on its own. This is not a flaw of dreaming, it is a lesson. Dreams expose the illusion of control with remarkable honesty. While awake, the mind clings to the belief that control keeps us safe. We plan, manage, predict, and rehearse. In dreams, those tools often fail. Scenes change without permission. Outcomes ignore effort, and yet, when you wake, you are unharmed. The body is intact. Life continues. This contrast is powerful. The Stoics believed much of human suffering comes from mistaking influence for control. We can influence effort, judgment, and response, but not outcomes, other people, or chance. Dreams dramatize this truth. You may try to steer the dream, but the dream unfolds according to its own logic. Fighting it rarely works. Observing it often brings relief. Recognizing the illusion of control in dreams weakens the need to control everything while awake. The subconscious learns through experience, not philosophy. When you repeatedly experience loss of control in dreams without consequence, the nervous system updates its expectations. Control is no longer equated with survival. Many people wake from dreams feeling frustrated or anxious because they tried to control what was happening and failed. But the Stoic lesson is not to try harder. It is to notice that nothing bad happened because control was absent. The danger was imagined. The outcome was harmless. This realization softens the grip of anxiety. Anxiety often arises from the belief that if you do not manage everything, something terrible will occur. Dreams disprove this nightly. You are not managing anything in sleep, yet you wake alive, safe, whole. Recognizing this does not happen through analysis. It happens through observation. When you stop judging dreams as successes or failures of control, they become demonstrations. Each dream shows you what happens when control is removed. And the answer is almost always nothing catastrophic. The Stoics taught that peace comes from aligning desire with reality. Dreams show reality without negotiation. Scenes shift. Characters act independently. The story moves on. Accepting this flow trains acceptance without effort. There is also humility in this recognition. You see that the mind does not run the universe, not even the inner one. This humility reduces mental strain. You stop trying to micromanage thoughts, emotions, and outcomes. Over time, this lesson transfers to waking life. When plans change unexpectedly, the body reacts less. When uncertainty appears, the mind does not rush to fix it. You remember the dream logic. Things unfold, and you remain. This does not make you passive, it makes you precise. You focus on what is yours to govern, your response, rather than wasting energy on what is not. Recognizing the illusion of control also reduces self-blame. Many people blame themselves for things that go wrong, believing they should have controlled the outcome. Dreams expose how little control there truly is. Scenes change regardless of intention. This insight brings compassion. The Stoics did not deny effort. They denied obsession with results. Dreams teach the same lesson without words. You act, the dream responds unpredictably, and life goes on. This understanding also deepens rest. When the mind stops trying to control sleep itself, sleep improves. When you stop managing thoughts, they soften. Control interferes with natural processes. Release allows them to complete. Recognizing the illusion of control in dreams also reduces fear of uncertainty. The mind sees that uncertainty is survivable, that not knowing what happens next is not dangerous. This lesson is deeply calming. There is also freedom in letting go of inner control. You stop policing every thought. You stop correcting every feeling. You allow experience to move. This freedom is not chaos. It is order without force. The Stoics believed that tranquility comes from understanding what belongs to us and what does not. Dreams redraw that boundary nightly. You do not control the scene, but you remain. You do not control the story, but you wake. Over time, the mind learns to relax its grip. Less control means less tension. Less tension means deeper rest. Deeper rest strengthens clarity. This recognition also shapes identity. You stop defining yourself by outcomes. You see that effort does not guarantee result, and result does not define worth. This loosens pressure across life. Dreams become teachers rather than disturbances. Each one reminds you that control is limited, and that this limitation is not a threat. It is a relief. As this lesson integrates, waking life feels lighter. You plan, but you do not cling. You act, but you do not panic. You accept change without collapse. The Stoics sought freedom from unnecessary suffering. Recognizing the illusion of control is central to that freedom. Dreams offer this lesson nightly, without risk, without effort. When you stop trying to dominate what cannot be dominated, energy returns. The mind rests more easily. The body softens faster. You sleep not because you controlled the night, but because you allowed it. And when you wake, you carry this allowance with you. You meet the day not as a controller, but as a participant. Calm, clear, ready. This is the quiet wisdom dreams offer. Control was never the source of safety. Understanding was. And once that understanding settles, both night and day become easier to live. As the illusion of control loosens and dreams are no longer something to fight or cling to, awareness naturally sharpens. What once felt chaotic begins to feel observable. This is where dream recall quietly transforms from curiosity into training. Not training for interpretation, but training for awareness itself. Dream recall is not about remembering details for meaning. It is about strengthening the ability to notice experience without becoming lost in it. When you remember a dream, even fragments, you are practicing the same skill that Stoics valued above all others: attention. Most people either forget their dreams completely or become absorbed by them. Both extremes miss the point. Forgetting skips the lesson. Absorption turns the lesson into distraction. Awareness sits in the middle. You remember, but you do not attach. When you recall a dream calmly, you practice noticing mental activity after it has passed. This is powerful because it mirrors waking life. Thoughts arise, events occur, emotions move, and then they are gone. Dream recall trains you to see this sequence clearly. The Stoics believed that wisdom begins with perception, not judgment, not reaction, perception. Dream recall strengthens this faculty in a subtle way. You learn to observe inner experience without needing to act on it. Each time you remember a dream without rushing to interpret it, you reinforce this habit. You notice images, emotions, sensations, and then you let them be. This builds mental clarity. You are practicing awareness in a state where the mind is naturally open and less defended. Dream recall also sharpens the boundary between awareness and content. You see that you can be aware of something without being inside it. This distinction is essential for emotional regulation. The one who observes is not the same as what is observed. Many people struggle with over-identification during the day. They become their thoughts, they become their moods. Dream recall gently weakens this habit. You remember a dream, but you are clearly not the dream. This understanding seeps deeper than words. There is also discipline in recall, not forcing memory, but allowing it to surface naturally. This teaches patience. You do not strain. You notice what appears. This same patience improves awareness during waking hours. The Stoics practiced moment-to-moment awareness as a form of self-governance. Dream recall extends this practice into the night. You are aware even after the mind has wandered freely. This continuity strengthens attention overall. Recall also reveals patterns without analysis. You may notice recurring themes, emotions, or tones, not to decode, but to recognize. Recognition without interpretation is awareness. It informs without disturbing. This practice also improves presence upon waking. Instead of jumping immediately into the day, you pause. You notice the transition. This pause sets the tone. The day begins with awareness instead of urgency. Dream recall trains you to hold experience lightly. You remember without clinging. You notice without reacting. This lightness reduces mental load. The mind does not accumulate unnecessary material. There is also humility here. You accept that not everything remembered is important. Some things pass without purpose. This acceptance reduces the need to extract meaning from every experience. The Stoics valued simplicity of mind. Dream recall practiced this way supports simplicity. You are aware, but not busy. Attentive, but not obsessed. Over time, this awareness carries into waking life. You notice thoughts as they arise. You recognize emotional shifts sooner. You catch reactions before they escalate. Awareness becomes faster and quieter. This is why dream recall is training, not entertainment. It refines perception. It strengthens the observer. And the stronger the observer, the less power content has. Dream recall also builds continuity of self-awareness. You are not fully unconscious at night. You are simply experiencing a different mode of mind. Recognizing this continuity reduces fear of inner experience. The Stoics believed that the mind should be a clear mirror. Dream recall polishes that mirror, not by adding information, but by refining attention. As awareness sharpens, dreams themselves often change. They become clearer, less chaotic, or they fade more quickly. Both outcomes are signs of reduced attachment. This practice does not require effort. It requires interest without investment. You are curious, but not invested. This balance is rare and valuable. Dream recall also strengthens memory in general. Not memory of facts, but memory of experience. You become better at noticing life as it happens. This makes you more present, more responsive, less reactive. Awareness becomes your default mode rather than something you switch on occasionally. The Stoics believed that awareness is the foundation of freedom. Without awareness, impulse rules. With awareness, choice appears. Dream recall trains awareness in a quiet, private way. No performance, no pressure, just noticing what passed through. As nights go by, this practice deepens. You wake with a sense of continuity rather than confusion. You feel oriented, grounded. The mind becomes familiar territory instead of something unpredictable. You trust your ability to observe without being overwhelmed, and that trust brings calm. Dream recall, when practiced as awareness training, does not pull you into the past. It anchors you in the present. You remember, you observe, you release. And in that simple sequence, awareness grows stronger, ready to guide you through both night and day with clarity and steadiness. As awareness becomes steadier and the mind learns to observe without clinging, another habit quietly asks to be released. The habit of reassurance. The subtle need to check, confirm, be comforted, or mentally replay something just to feel safe enough to rest. This habit is so common that most people never question it. The Stoics did. Seeking reassurance at night often feels reasonable. You want to know things will be okay, that tomorrow is under control, that you didn't mess something up, that someone still approves of you. These thoughts masquerade as responsibility, but underneath them is uncertainty asking for relief. The Stoics understood that reassurance is not the same as security. Reassurance is external and temporary. Security is internal and stable. Ending the day without seeking reassurance is how the second is built. At night, reassurance seeking shows up in many forms. Replaying conversations to make sure nothing went wrong, planning tomorrow repeatedly to reduce anxiety, checking messages one last time, even mentally telling yourself comforting stories. Each of these sends the same message to the nervous system. Safety depends on confirmation. When you go to sleep without reassurance, you teach the opposite lesson. You show the mind that it is allowed to rest even when certainty is missing. This is a powerful form of self-trust. The Stoics believed that peace comes from accepting uncertainty, not eliminating it. Night is where this acceptance can be practiced most honestly. There is nothing left to do. No action can be taken. Seeking reassurance here only keeps the mind active without offering real control. Ending the day without reassurance does not mean denying fear or pretending confidence. It means allowing uncertainty to exist without trying to soothe it immediately. This is uncomfortable at first. The mind has been trained to believe that reassurance equals safety. Removing it feels like exposure, but exposure is exactly how the nervous system learns. When reassurance is withheld and nothing bad happens, the system updates. It learns that uncertainty is survivable, that rest does not require guarantees. This practice also reduces dependency on others' approval. Many people carry social tension into the night, wondering how they were perceived. Ending the day without reassurance means not resolving these questions before sleep. You accept that you do not control others' thoughts and that your worth does not need nightly confirmation. The Stoics were clear about this. What is outside your control should not be carried into rest. Other people's opinions belong to them. Outcomes belong to chance. Your task is not to settle these things before sleeping, but to let them go. There is dignity in this letting go. You are not careless. You are precise. You know when action is possible and when it is not. Night is not a time for social repair or future-proofing. It is a time for restoration. Ending the day without reassurance also strengthens emotional resilience. When you stop needing to feel okay before resting, you remove a major source of anxiety. You learn to rest while still feeling uncertain. This skill carries into stressful situations during the day. The Stoics believed that courage is quiet acceptance of what cannot be changed in the moment. Ending the day without reassurance is courage practiced nightly. You accept not knowing. You accept unfinishedness. You accept that some questions remain unanswered. This acceptance calms the mind more deeply than reassurance ever could. Reassurance fades. Acceptance stays. Over time, the urge to seek reassurance weakens. The mind no longer panics when certainty is absent. It trusts that clarity will come when needed. This trust reduces overthinking and improves sleep quality. There is also freedom here. You stop depending on internal dialogue to feel safe. Silence becomes tolerable, even comforting. The Stoics did not seek comfort through constant reassurance. They sought steadiness through understanding. Understanding that life is uncertain. Understanding that they could meet it anyway. As you end nights without reassurance, mornings feel different. You wake without having exhausted yourself trying to secure the future. Energy returns. Focus improves. This practice also clarifies responsibility. You stop carrying things that are not yours to resolve. This lightens the inner load. Ending the day without seeking reassurance is not withdrawal from life. It is respect for timing. You trust that tomorrow will arrive, and you will meet it as you always have. And that trust is enough. When the mind no longer needs to be comforted before resting, sleep becomes deeper. Not because everything feels settled, but because nothing needs to be. This is a quiet strength, one that does not depend on answers, one that does not beg for certainty. The Stoics knew that a person who can rest without reassurance is a person who stands firmly within themselves. Night after night, this practice builds that firmness, and from it, a calm emerges that does not ask permission to exist. As reassurance fades and the mind learns to rest without guarantees, another habit quietly reveals itself. The habit of trying to live tomorrow before it arrives. Midnight becomes a courtroom where plans are argued, outcomes are predicted, and problems are rehearsed. The Stoics saw this clearly and refused the invitation. Trying to solve tomorrow at midnight feels productive, but it is not. It is anxiety wearing the mask of responsibility. The mind believes that if it thinks hard enough, prepares enough, worries enough, it can prevent discomfort. But the night is not built for strategy. It is built for restoration. At midnight, the mind is tired, emotional, and incomplete. It lacks information. It lacks perspective. Decisions made here are rarely wise. The Stoics understood timing. They believed that reason has its hours, and night is not one of them. Refusing to solve tomorrow at midnight is an act of respect for reason. You acknowledge that clear thinking requires rest, that problems look different when the body is restored, that wisdom is compromised when fatigue speaks. Most people do not realize how often they rehearse tomorrow. They plan conversations. They anticipate conflicts. They imagine success or failure. Each rehearsal feels like preparation, but it is actually mental duplication. Tomorrow will happen once. Rehearsing it 100 times does not improve it. It only exhausts you. The Stoics believed that worry is interest paid on a debt that may never come due. Midnight worry is the most expensive kind. It charges energy without delivering clarity. Refusing it preserves strength. This refusal is not avoidance. It is postponement. You are not saying never. You are saying not now. This distinction matters. You trust that tomorrow will bring the appropriate time and conditions for thinking. Refusing to solve tomorrow at midnight also trains patience. You allow uncertainty to remain unresolved overnight. This teaches the nervous system that uncertainty does not require immediate action. Over time, this reduces anxiety. The mind often argues back. It says, "If you don't think about this now, you'll forget." But the Stoics knew this was a trick. Important things return. What truly matters does not disappear because you slept. This trust reduces mental hoarding. There is also humility in this refusal. You accept that you cannot control outcomes through thought alone. Planning has limits. Midnight planning crosses those limits and becomes illusion. The Stoics separated preparation from rumination. Preparation happens when action is possible. Rumination happens when action is not. Nighttime problem-solving is almost always rumination. Refusing to solve tomorrow at midnight frees the mind from false responsibility. You stop carrying problems that do not belong to the present moment. This lightens emotional load. This practice also improves sleep quality. The mind that is not busy simulating the future settles faster. Dreams soften. Rest deepens. Over time, this refusal changes your relationship with time. You stop borrowing stress from the future. You stay rooted in what is real now. This presence is calming. The Stoics believed that peace comes from doing what is appropriate to the moment. At night, what is appropriate is rest. Thinking ahead is inappropriate here, no matter how convincing it feels. Refusing midnight problem-solving also strengthens self-trust. You trust that you will handle tomorrow when it becomes today. This trust reduces compulsive planning. There is freedom in this. You are no longer trapped in a cycle of anticipation. You allow life to unfold step by step. When you practice this consistently, mornings change. You wake with clearer judgment. Problems feel smaller. Solutions appear more easily. This is not magic. It is the result of rested reason. The Stoics valued efficiency of mind. They conserved thought for when it mattered. Refusing to solve tomorrow at midnight is mental conservation. This does not make you careless. It makes you precise. You think when thinking helps. You rest when thinking harms. Over time, the urge to plan at night weakens. The mind learns that rest is not dangerous, that problems wait, that clarity returns. Eventually, midnight becomes quiet again, not because life is solved, but because life is respected. The Stoics knew that the future is best met by a rested mind, not a worried one. Refusing to solve tomorrow at midnight honors this wisdom. You close the day cleanly. You stop arguing with what is not here yet. You allow the night to do its work. And when tomorrow arrives, you meet it whole, present, and ready, without having exhausted yourself the night before. As the habit of solving tomorrow at midnight fades, the mind begins to face a quieter challenge. Worry does not disappear just because you tell it to stop. It waits, it looks for openings, and when it finds one, it rushes in with urgency. This is where a deeper skill is required, not eliminating worry, but postponing it. Postponing worry is different from denial. Denial pretends nothing is wrong. Postponement acknowledges that something may matter, but refuses to give it attention at the wrong time. The Stoics were clear about this distinction. They did not suppress concern. They delayed it until reason was strong enough to handle it. Worry thrives at night because the mind is tired and unguarded. Problems feel larger in the dark. Thoughts lose proportion. The nervous system is more reactive. Training the mind to postpone worry is a way of protecting reason from being overwhelmed when it is least capable. The mind often insists that worry is helpful. It claims that worrying now will prevent pain later. But the Stoics saw this as confusion. Worry without the ability to act is not preparation. It is self-disturbance. Postponement begins with recognizing timing. You do not argue with the worry. You do not analyze it. You simply note that this is not the hour for it. This quiet recognition removes urgency. The worry is not rejected, it is rescheduled. This act alone changes the relationship with worry. Instead of being dragged by it, you are directing it. You show the mind that concern does not control the schedule. Reason does. The Stoics believed that thoughts lose power when they are placed in the proper frame. A worry that feels overwhelming at night often shrinks in daylight. By postponing it, you allow perspective to return. Training this skill takes repetition. The mind will test boundaries. It will return with the same concern, dressed in stronger language. Each time, the response remains calm and consistent. Not now. Later. This consistency teaches the nervous system something important. Worry does not need immediate action. The body stops reacting as if danger is present. Over time, the emotional charge weakens. Postponing worry also preserves sleep. Sleep is not passive rest. It is repair. When worry interrupts this repair, problems multiply. By postponing worry, you protect the very resource that allows you to handle problems effectively. The Stoics understood that a tired mind invents threats. They did not trust judgments made in exhaustion. Training the mind to postpone worry is an act of intellectual humility. You accept that you are not at your best right now. There is also self-respect in this practice. You do not allow the mind to exhaust itself unnecessarily. You treat your attention as valuable. Over time, the mind learns a new habit. When worry arises at night, it no longer escalates automatically. It pauses. It waits. Sometimes it fades entirely before morning. This practice also reduces daytime anxiety. When the mind knows that worry has a place and time, it stops leaking into every moment. Boundaries create calm. Postponing worry is not avoidance because the concern can be addressed later if needed. But many worries dissolve overnight. By postponing, you avoid wasting energy on problems that solve themselves. The Stoics believed that much of what disturbs us never happens. Night worry amplifies this tendency. Postponement breaks the cycle. There is patience required here. You may not feel immediate relief, but relief is not the goal. Training is. Each postponed worry is a repetition. Each repetition strengthens control. This control is quiet. It does not feel dramatic. It feels like space. Space between thought and reaction. Space where calm can exist. As this space grows, sleep becomes steadier. The mind no longer braces for intrusion. It knows that worries will be handled later, not now. Eventually, postponing worry becomes automatic. The mind recognizes night as a time for rest, not rehearsal. This recognition brings peace. The Stoics sought freedom from unnecessary suffering. Worry at the wrong time is unnecessary suffering. Training the mind to postpone it is an act of wisdom. You are not refusing to care. You are caring at the right time. When you close the day with postponed worries instead of rehearsed fears, you preserve strength. You wake with clearer judgment. Problems feel more manageable. And often, the worry that felt urgent at night no longer feels important at all. This is the gift of postponement. It reveals how much mental noise is created by timing, not reality. The night becomes quieter. The mind becomes disciplined, and worry, once loud and demanding, learns to wait its turn. As worry learns to wait its turn, fear begins to change its voice. It no longer arrives as a shout demanding obedience. It shows up more quietly, almost like a notification rather than an alarm. This is where one of the most important Stoic lessons becomes real, not as an idea, but as experience. Fear is information, not instruction. Most people are trained to obey fear automatically. Fear says, stop, and they stop. Fear says, escape, and they run. Fear says, prepare for the worst, and the mind obeys without question. But the Stoics made a clear distinction. Fear is a signal that something matters. It is not a command that tells you what to do. At night, fear becomes more noticeable because there is nothing to distract from it. In the dark, sensations feel louder, thoughts feel heavier, the body is tired, and fear uses this moment to speak. The mistake most people make is assuming that because fear is present, action is required. The Stoics rejected this assumption. They understood that fear often arrives before reason has a chance to speak. It is fast, emotional, and protective by nature. But protection does not always mean truth. A signal is meant to be noticed, not obeyed blindly. When fear appears at night, it often takes the form of bodily sensation. A tight chest, a shallow breath, a sudden alertness. These sensations feel urgent, but they do not contain instructions. They only indicate that the system is reacting. Fear becomes a command only when you treat it as one. When you start solving, rehearsing, escaping, or resisting, you give fear authority. When you observe it instead, fear loses its power to direct behavior. The Stoics practiced this observation deliberately. They noticed fear the same way they noticed hunger or fatigue, as information, something to acknowledge without surrendering judgment. At night, this practice is especially effective because action is not possible. You cannot fix tomorrow at midnight. You cannot escape life in the dark. All you can do is respond internally. When fear is treated as a signal, you ask a quiet question. What is this pointing to? Not to solve it now, but to understand its nature. Is it a real threat or a familiar pattern? Is it something within control or outside it? Often, the answer is clear when you stop reacting. Fear loses intensity when it is not fed. Like worry, it thrives on engagement. The more you argue with it, the stronger it becomes. The more you obey it, the more authority it claims. But when you notice fear without moving toward or away from it, it begins to soften. This does not happen instantly. Fear tests boundaries. It may intensify briefly when ignored. This is not danger. It is habit losing influence. The Stoics understood this escalation and did not mistake it for truth. Treating fear as a signal also builds courage naturally. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear decide. Each night you feel fear without obeying it. You train the system to tolerate fear without panic. This training carries into waking life. When fear appears during the day, you recognize it. You feel it. But you do not rush. You pause. You allow reason to arrive. This pause is everything. Fear often exaggerates outcomes. At night, this exaggeration feels convincing. Thoughts turn into threats. Possibilities turn into certainties. Recognizing fear as a signal restores proportion. You remember that fear speaks in extremes, not in facts. The Stoics believed that clarity requires distance. Fear collapses distance by creating urgency. Observing fear without obedience restores space. In that space, reason can operate. This approach also protects the nervous system. When fear is constantly obeyed, the system stays in a state of readiness. Sleep becomes shallow. Recovery is incomplete. Treating fear as a signal allows the body to stand down even when fear is present. There is also self-respect in this practice. You do not shame yourself for feeling fear. You do not label it weakness. You treat it as a message, not a failure. This kindness reduces internal conflict. Over time, fear changes its role. It becomes quieter, more precise. It signals only when something truly requires attention. The constant background fear fades because it is no longer rewarded. The Stoics understood that freedom comes from choosing responses, not eliminating sensations. Fear will always arise at times, but it does not get to rule. Night is where this lesson is rehearsed without consequence. You feel fear. You stay still. Nothing bad happens. The body learns. The mind learns. This learning builds deep confidence. You stop fearing fear itself. You trust that you can feel fear and remain steady. This trust reduces fear's impact everywhere else. When fear is no longer a command, sleep improves. The mind stops scanning for danger. The body relaxes even when unease appears. Rest becomes deeper, and when you wake, fear no longer controls the tone of the day. It may appear, but it does not decide. The Stoics did not seek a fearless life. They sought a governed one, a life where fear informs but does not dominate. Treating fear as a signal is how that governance begins, quietly, repeatedly. Often at night, when there is nothing else to do but notice and choose. In that choice, fear loses its crown, and the mind, finally, rests under reason's rule. As fear loses its authority and no longer dictates your next move, something even more subtle remains. A space where answers are missing, where outcomes are unclear, where the mind cannot finish the story. This space is uncertainty. Most people rush to close it. The Stoics learned to leave it open. Uncertainty is uncomfortable because it removes the illusion of control. The mind prefers conclusions, even painful ones, over open questions. At night, this discomfort becomes louder. With no distractions, uncertainty feels exposed. The instinct is to challenge it, to analyze, predict, or worry it into submission. But uncertainty cannot be defeated by thinking. It can only be accepted. Allowing uncertainty to exist unchallenged is not giving up. It is recognizing reality as it is, rather than forcing it to be something else. The Stoics understood that uncertainty is not a problem to solve, but a condition of life. The future is never fully known. Other people are never fully predictable. Outcomes are never guaranteed. Fighting this truth creates constant tension. Accepting it brings relief. At night, uncertainty often shows up as unanswered questions. Will this work out? Did I make the right choice? What if something goes wrong? These questions feel urgent, but they are not actionable. Challenging them only keeps the mind active without offering resolution. Allowing uncertainty to exist means letting these questions hang without response. Not because they do not matter, but because this moment is not meant to answer them. This restraint protects mental energy. The mind often argues back. It says that leaving things uncertain is irresponsible. But the Stoics made a clear distinction between responsibility and control. You are responsible for your actions, not for guaranteeing outcomes. Night is not the time for action. It is the time for restoration. When uncertainty is allowed without challenge, the nervous system begins to relax. It no longer feels pressured to find certainty where none exists. This reduces anxiety at its root. Uncertainty becomes dangerous only when it is resisted. Resistance turns uncertainty into fear. Acceptance turns it into space. Space allows calm to return. The Stoics practiced this acceptance deliberately. They reminded themselves that not knowing is natural, that clarity arrives when it is meant to, that forcing answers early often creates false certainty. At night, this practice is especially powerful because nothing can be resolved anyway. By allowing uncertainty to remain open, you align with reality instead of fighting it. There is humility in this alignment. You accept the limits of your knowledge. You accept the limits of your control. This humility reduces mental strain. You stop demanding certainty from a world that does not offer it. Allowing uncertainty to exist unchallenged also builds trust. Trust in time. Trust in reason. Trust in your ability to respond when clarity arrives. This trust is calming because it removes the need to constantly prepare for every possibility. Many people exhaust themselves trying to eliminate uncertainty. They plan excessively. They seek reassurance. They worry endlessly. But uncertainty is not eliminated this way. It is only postponed, often with added stress. The Stoics believed that peace comes from wanting what is, not what you wish were certain. This shift changes everything. You stop needing the future to be clear in order to rest. This practice also deepens patience. You learn to sit with incomplete information without agitation. This patience improves decision-making during the day. You stop rushing choices out of discomfort. Allowing uncertainty does not make you passive. It makes you responsive. You act when action is possible. You rest when it is not. This rhythm preserves strength. Over time, the mind learns that uncertainty does not require vigilance. It learns that rest can coexist with not knowing. This lesson is deeply soothing. Sleep improves because the mind is no longer trying to solve the unsolvable. The body relaxes because it is no longer preparing for imagined futures. Uncertainty also becomes less frightening. When you stop challenging it, it stops pushing back. It becomes neutral, sometimes even quiet. The Stoics understood that much of life unfolds beyond planning. They trusted their ability to meet events as they came. Allowing uncertainty at night strengthens this trust. This trust carries into waking life. When plans change or information is missing, you remain steady. You do not collapse into anxiety. You wait. You observe. You choose when clarity appears. Allowing uncertainty unchallenged also frees attention. You stop spending mental energy on what cannot be known. That energy returns to the present, where life actually happens. There is peace in this return. You breathe more deeply. Muscles soften. Thoughts slow. Night becomes a place where you do not demand answers. You allow questions to exist without pressure. This gentleness creates deep rest. The Stoics did not promise certainty. They promised steadiness in uncertainty. Night is where this steadiness is practiced quietly. You close the day without forcing conclusions. You accept that some things remain open, and you rest anyway. In doing so, you teach the mind a profound lesson. You do not need certainty to be okay. And from that lesson, calm grows naturally, unforced, durable, and ready to meet whatever tomorrow brings, whenever it arrives. As uncertainty is allowed to remain open without resistance, the mind touches something even deeper. A quiet ending, not dramatic, not frightening, just a release. This is where the Stoics placed one of their most powerful reflections: sleep as a daily rehearsal for death. This idea is often misunderstood because death is treated as something distant or dark. The Stoics did not see it that way. They saw death as a natural conclusion and sleep as its gentle cousin. Each night, consciousness fades. Control dissolves. The self loosens. And yet, nothing is lost. You return. Sleep rehearses this letting go in the safest way possible. You surrender awareness without harm. You release the body from command. You stop managing identity. And in the morning, you awaken whole. This daily cycle quietly trains the mind to accept impermanence without fear. Most fear of death is not fear of ending, but fear of losing control. Sleep removes control every night. You do not choose when dreams begin. You do not govern the depth of rest. You cannot remain awake forever, and still you survive. This repetition teaches the nervous system something essential. Letting go is not dangerous. The Stoics believed that fearing death poisons life. Not because death is near, but because fear narrows attention. Sleep counters this poison daily. It reminds you that surrender is part of living, not the opposite of it. When you lie down at night and allow consciousness to fade without struggle, you are practicing acceptance. You are saying, without words, I do not need to hold everything together. This acceptance is the same posture required to face death calmly, whenever it comes. Sleep as death rehearsal also dissolves ego attachment. The ego thrives on continuity. It wants to persist, define, control. Sleep interrupts this narrative every night. The self dissolves into silence. No identity is required. No achievements are defended. No mistakes are judged. And when the ego returns in the morning, it is lighter. This lightness carries into life. You stop gripping moments so tightly. You stop fearing endings so intensely. You become more present because you are less afraid of things passing. The Stoics practiced remembering death not to become morbid, but to become free. Sleep offers this reminder gently, without effort. Each night says, this too can end, and it is okay. There is also humility in this rehearsal. No matter how powerful, intelligent, or important you are, sleep claims you. Kings, Philosophers, soldiers, and servants all lie down the same way. Control ends equally. This humility softens arrogance and anxiety alike. Sleep as death rehearsal also reframes rest. Rest is not laziness, it is surrender, a conscious agreement with nature. You stop resisting the cycle. This cooperation builds peace. When people fear death, they often fear the unknown. Sleep is unknown each night. You do not know what you will dream. You do not know how deeply you will rest, and yet you enter it willingly. This willingness trains courage without effort. The Stoics trusted this process. They knew that familiarity reduces fear. By experiencing a small ending every night, the mind becomes less shocked by the idea of a final one. This does not make life feel shorter, it makes it feel fuller. When you accept that things end, you stop postponing presence. You listen more carefully. You act more honestly. You waste less time on trivial fear. Sleep as death rehearsal also reduces nighttime anxiety. When you stop fighting unconsciousness, sleep arrives more smoothly. You no longer interpret fading awareness as danger. You recognize it as natural. This recognition calms the nervous system deeply. The body does not brace. The mind does not panic. You fall asleep not as someone losing control, but as someone returning to balance. Over time, this practice changes how you face endings of all kinds. The end of a day, the end of a conversation, the end of a phase of life. You learn to close things cleanly, without clinging, without collapse. The Stoics believed that dying well begins with living well, and living well includes knowing how to end things. Sleep teaches this nightly. When you allow the day to end without resistance, you rehearse letting go. When you allow consciousness to fade without fear, you rehearse trust. These rehearsals accumulate. Eventually, the thought of death loses its sharp edge, not because you deny it, but because you have practiced its feeling, release, hundreds of times in sleep. This does not remove grief or sadness. It removes panic. It removes denial. It removes the need to control what cannot be controlled. Sleep becomes sacred in this view, not as escape, but as practice. Practice in humility. Practice in acceptance. Practice in peace. You lie down, you let go, you disappear for a while, and you return. This return teaches the deepest Stoic lesson of all. Endings are not always loss. Sometimes they are rest. When you understand this, sleep becomes easier. Fear softens. The mind loosens its grip, and life lived between these small endings becomes calmer, clearer, and more fully your own. As the night teaches you how to let the day end, another release quietly asks to happen. Not of thoughts, not of fear, but of outcomes. The results you wanted, the answers you hoped for, the way things were supposed to turn out. Before unconsciousness arrives, these too must be set down. Outcomes are heavy because they carry expectation. During the day, expectation feels necessary. You plan, you aim, you act with purpose. But when night comes, holding outcomes serves no function. Action has ended. Control has expired. What remains is attachment, and attachment is restless. The Stoics understood this clearly. They separated effort from result. Effort belonged to them. Outcomes did not. Letting go of outcomes before sleep was not giving up on life. It was giving life back to reality. Most nighttime restlessness comes from unfinished mental contracts. It should have gone differently. I hope this works out. What if it doesn't? These thoughts are not about action. They are about control after the window for control has closed. The mind keeps pulling on doors that are already locked for the night. Letting go of outcomes begins with recognizing timing. Night is not the time. Outcomes are decided. It is the time the decider recovers. When you accept this, the internal struggle softens. This release is not emotional suppression. You may still care deeply. Letting go of outcomes does not erase desire. It pauses attachment. You say quietly, "This no longer needs me right now." The Stoics believed that suffering grows when we confuse what we can influence with what we can command. Outcomes feel personal, but they are shaped by countless forces beyond your reach. Carrying them into sleep is carrying weight you cannot lift. Before unconsciousness, the mind is especially sensitive. Thoughts echo louder. Emotions sticks longer. This is why outcomes feel heavier at night. The solution is not to think harder. It is to stop holding. Letting go here means allowing results to exist without rehearsal. You stop replaying possibilities. You stop imagining consequences. You allow the outcome, whatever it may be, to remain unknown until it actually arrives. This uncertainty feels uncomfortable at first. The mind wants closure before rest, but closure is not always available. The Stoics taught that peace does not come from answers, but from alignment with reality. And reality does not offer outcomes on demand. When you release outcomes at night, you send a powerful signal to the nervous system. You are safe even without knowing. You can rest even without resolution. This signal calms the body more deeply than reassurance ever could. There is also humility in this act. You acknowledge that life is larger than your plans. That effort does not guarantee result. This humility reduces inner pressure. You stop measuring your worth against things you do not control. Letting go of outcomes also cleans the transition into sleep. The mind no longer drags the future into the present. It returns to the body, to breathe, to stillness. Sleep arrives because there is nothing left to manage. The Stoics practiced this release deliberately. They would remind themselves that whatever happened was now outside their control, and whatever would happen was not yet theirs to handle. This simple recognition freed the mind.
Over time, this practice reshapes your relationship with effort. You still act fully during the day, but you stop clinging afterward. This balance preserves energy. You become effective without being exhausted.
Letting go of outcomes before unconsciousness also prevents emotional carryover. When outcomes are held overnight, they color dreams, mood, and morning reactions. Releasing them protects emotional neutrality. There is trust required here. Trust that you will respond wisely when outcomes arrive. Trust that you do not need to pre-live every possibility. This trust is built through repetition. Each night you let go and wake up capable, trust grows. The Stoics believed that freedom is found in accepting the limits of control. Night is where this acceptance becomes practical. You stop trying to carry tomorrow in your arms while lying in the dark. This practice also deepens rest. Sleep becomes heavier, quieter, more restorative. The mind is no longer half awake, guarding imagined results. Eventually, letting go of outcomes becomes natural. You notice the urge to rehearse and gently decline it, not with force, with understanding. This understanding carries into waking life. You become less reactive to results, less shaken by uncertainty. You focus on what is yours to do and release the rest.
The Stoics did not promise success. They promised steadiness. Letting go of outcomes at night is how steadiness is preserved.
You close the day knowing you did what you could. You release what you cannot control. You allow the future to remain future, and you sleep. Not because everything is resolved, but because nothing unresolved needs you right now. In that release, the mind finds rest. And from that rest, clarity returns when it is actually useful. This is how nights restore strength without effort. You stop gripping what cannot be held. You allow life to unfold without your constant supervision. And when morning comes, you rise ready, not burdened by what might be, but grounded in what is. As outcomes are released and the future is allowed to remain untouched, the mind settles into a quieter truth. Nothing is fixed. Nothing stays exactly as it is. And for the first time, this realization does not feel threatening. It feels relieving. This is where rest becomes a teacher of impermanence. Impermanence is often spoken about during hardship, but it is learned most gently in rest. Each night, the day ends. Thoughts dissolve. Roles disappear. The body lets go of effort. What felt solid a few hours ago fades without resistance, and the world does not collapse. This quiet ending repeats itself daily, slowly reshaping how the mind relates to change. Most suffering comes from resisting impermanence, wanting moments to last longer, wanting problems to end immediately, wanting certainty where none exists. The Stoics understood that peace does not come from stopping change, but from accepting it fully. Sleep trains this acceptance without force. When you rest, you are practicing disappearance in small form. Awareness dims, control fades, the self loosens. And yet, there is no loss. You return. This teaches the nervous system something words cannot. Endings are survivable. The body understands impermanence before the mind does. Muscles relax, breath slows, sensations shift and fade. By allowing these changes instead of resisting them, you teach yourself that letting go is safe. Accepting impermanence through rest does not mean becoming detached from life. It means becoming aligned with it. Life moves. Feelings move. Circumstances move. Rest allows you to move with them instead of fighting every shift. The Stoics believed that clinging creates tension. Night reveals this clearly. The more you cling to the day, its emotions, its events, its outcomes, the harder it is to sleep. When you release, sleep arrives. The body responds immediately to acceptance. Impermanence also applies to inner states. Anxiety rises and falls. Sadness comes and goes. Calm appears and disappears. When you rest without demanding any state to remain, the mind learns flexibility. This flexibility is the foundation of resilience. Rest teaches impermanence through repetition. Every night is a reminder that nothing needs to be held forever. Every morning is proof that letting go does not erase you. Over time, this repetition dissolves fear of change. The Stoics practiced this awareness deliberately. They reminded themselves that everything passes, including difficulty. Sleep offers this reminder naturally. You do not need to think about impermanence. You experience it. Accepting impermanence through rest also reduces emotional intensity. When you know feelings will pass, you do not fight them as much. You allow them to move. This reduces suffering without suppressing emotion. There is also freedom here. You stop demanding permanence from people, situations, and even from yourself. You allow growth. You allow endings. You allow rest. Many people fear rest because it feels like loss of momentum. But momentum is temporary. Rest restores what movement drains. Accepting this cycle prevents burnout. The Stoics believed that nature operates in cycles, day and night, action and rest. growth and decay. Fighting these cycles creates strain. Aligning with them creates peace. When you accept impermanence at night, you stop chasing stability where it does not exist. You stop asking the night to secure the future or preserve the past. You let it do what it does best: reset. This acceptance also improves sleep quality. The mind stops gripping thoughts. The body stops bracing. Sleep becomes deeper because nothing is being held back. Over time, impermanence stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like flow. You trust that whatever ends makes space for what follows. This trust reduces anxiety and increases presence. Accepting impermanence through rest also reshapes identity. You stop defining yourself by fixed traits or past outcomes. You see yourself as evolving. This perspective is calming. The Stoics did not deny attachment. They practiced appropriate attachment. They cared deeply, but they did not cling. Rest is where this balance is rehearsed nightly. As nights pass, you may notice that change disturbs you less. Plans shifting feel manageable. Emotions passing feel natural. You adapt more easily. This adaptability is strength, not rigidity, not control, but responsiveness. Accepting impermanence does not mean giving up on meaning. It means finding meaning in presence rather than permanence. You value moments without trying to freeze them. Sleep becomes a quiet ritual of trust. Trust that letting go will not erase what matters. Trust that you will wake ready to meet whatever comes. The Stoics understood that peace comes from aligning desire with reality. Reality is impermanent. Rest teaches this gently. You lie down, you release, you disappear for a while, and in that disappearance you learn the deepest lesson. Nothing needs to stay for you to be whole. When you wake, the day feels lighter, not because life is simpler, but because you are no longer fighting its nature. This is how rest trains acceptance. Without lectures, without effort, through experience. Night after night, impermanence is practiced, and with it, peace grows quietly, naturally, and steadily. Night after night, you've seen what most people never notice. Sleep is not an escape, it is training. You learn that rest reveals who truly governs the mind. That fatigue is information, not failure. That the night is not a place to lose discipline, but where discipline is forged. You learn to disarm thought, release emotion, loosen identity, and step back from fear, worry, and control. You saw how dreams teach non-attachment, how uncertainty can exist without panic, and how letting go before unconsciousness restores strength instead of stealing it. This is what it means to sleep like a Stoic king, not seeking comfort to hide from life, not chasing certainty to feel safe, not fighting the night, but ruling yourself within it. When you rest this way, the mind rewires quietly. Calm becomes familiar. Courage becomes steady. Self-trust becomes automatic. And when morning comes, you don't wake up reactive or burdened. You wake up grounded, clear, and ready. If this way of resting spoke to something deeper in you, leave a comment with one word: sovereignty. It tells me you understood that sleep is not weakness. It is mastery, practiced in silence. And if you want more teachings that sharpen the mind, steady the heart, and strengthen you from the inside out, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. New wisdom is coming, and it's meant to be lived, not just heard. Rest well tonight, rule yourself quietly, and wake like a king.